Tonight's school board meeting, Wednesday, December 19th, 2018. Will you please rise for the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Casey?
Present.
Mr. Duffy?
Present.
Ms. Goodmartin?
Present.
Mr. Lesh?
Here.
Mr. McAndrew?
Present.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Present.
Mrs. Dixon?
Present.
8 present.
At this time, I'd like to take a moment of silence for Todd Hartman, who was a former school director and gave 3 terms to public service, who passed away last week. And his wife Colleen works as a nurse in our Scranton School District. And also to any other people that we may have lost, may not have mentioned. Thank you. Solicitor's report.
Madam President, due to the length of today's agenda, I will forego a report this evening other than to wish the board and everyone here a happy holiday. Thank you.
Thank you. Announcement of executive session.
Executive sessions were held on November 19th, 2018, November 29th, December 5th, December 12th, and December 17th, 2018, to discuss personnel, review of special education settlements, real estate negotiations regarding all employee groups, and potential litigation.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Madam President, I too will forego my time this evening, but would like to wish everyone a happy and restful holiday.
Thank you, Doctor. Now it's time for our public comment segment of the meeting. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to speak and will be timed by the board secretary. When your time is up, you will be allowed to finish your sentence, and the board will not answer any questions, will not tolerate any derogatory remarks or personal attacks. Union officials will be allowed 4 minutes. First speaker signed in is Larry Moran.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. May it please the board. I am Larry Moran. I'm a Scranton attorney. I prepared and submitted a bid to be the school district's labor counsel on behalf of my law firm. And I came tonight specifically to address what I believe are false statements and mischaracterizations that have been published, really about me particularly, in an effort to distract, but ultimately to disqualify my law firm from consideration. Primarily regarding, I believe, my involvement with True Solutions Project, which is a business entity that I organized and incorporated in October of 2016 for a client. I am not the trustee of True Solutions Project. I was not the trustee of True Solutions Project when any campaign contributions were made in the spring of 2017. However, in October of 2016, when I formed the entity on behalf of a client, who is now the trustee, or was until I believe the entity was not re-registered, it was for the purpose of conducting certain business and certain political activities, I'm sure. As I do in every instance, I incorporated it that way. I was the organizer. I listed my name and my law firm's address. I looked back through my notes from just this year and noticed that a security company that I formed, a real estate development company that I formed, an aviation company that I formed, an insurance agency that I formed, all on behalf of clients, also had my name as the organizer and my law firm's address. That is a common practice for me and a common practice for the attorneys in my firm, and I think it's common and standard in the industry. Second, it was made clear at some meeting that there was concerns about my involvement with one of the school district's vendors, a municipal collection company called eCollect. I believe that I did send, or had somebody in my office send a letter formally putting the board on notice that we do not represent eCollect. I am not the lawyer for that entity. Specifically what happened was I came on one occasion to address this board because Todd Henry, who is a Philadelphia attorney, and the attorney for eCollect is also my landlord in my Philadelphia office. On short notice, they were asked to come to a board meeting and answer some questions. Mr. Henry called me and asked me as a favor to come and do that. They did offer to pay me. I declined. It was pro bono publico, for the good of the public. I never accepted money from the company. I never signed an agreement. I never took them on as a client. I never represented them in any way. There is no conflict in any way as I see there. I also was told of, or I read of, concerns about potential double billing. And I can tell you that we have a billing policy in our office that we do not bill for office conferences with attorneys. If I'm dealing with a matter and I'm talking to another attorney in my firm about that matter, I don't bill the client for that time. I similarly would not bill the Scranton School District for any consultations with its solicitor. Whether they're telephone conversations or emails, we would treat those the same way as internal office conferences. I would also like to take a last minute to say that I'm one of 8 attorneys in my firm, and it's the firm, Joyce, Carmody, and Moran, who submitted that proposal. And we're all talented, hardworking individuals, eager to be strategic partners here, and I don't believe that anything that's been said or offered is at all disqualifying, and I would hope that this board would look past that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Ernie Spasto, and I'm not sure if I said it correctly.
That's correct, which is unusual. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the agenda items this evening is to award a printer and copier contract. I want to make a brief statement on behalf of the low bidder, Fraser Inc. I'm sure you know, in August of this year, a formal request for proposal was submitted that had specific requirements for approximately 85 to 90 multi-function copiers and printers. At the bid opening, Fraser met all the specs and was the low bidder by over $275,000. Bidders were also permitted to submit an alternate bid with substitute equipment. Fraser was the low bidder on that as well by over $87,000. As part of this bid, Fraser will have a representative on site at one of the high school's administration building each school day in the morning. And maintenance service will be just hours away. In addition to being the low bidder, Fraser has over 45 years experience in the field and extensive experience with school districts in particular. They are currently servicing over 60 school districts in eastern Pennsylvania and have thousands of units in the field. After the bid opening, certain vendors were invited to give sample units for some of the staff to try out. Fraser supplied some sample units, and their feedback from the end users was universally positive. All of the end users were very happy with their product and service. In summary, as you vote to award the contract for the district-wide management services program, please keep in mind that Fraser has over 45 years experience, has extensive experience with school districts, serving over 60 currently. We'll have an on-site representative on site every day, and was the low bidder by over $275,000. Obviously, cutting costs and trying to balance the budget is an important factor. Fraser's bid would save the district over $250,000 over the life of the contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Maura McDade Ornosky? What is it? Ornansky, sorry. But it's Marcy.
Yes. Good evening, directors. Marcy McDade-Barnansky, West Scranton Intermediate School Guidance Counselor. I have provided each of you with a letter signed by the 16 members of the guidance counseling staff, and in follow-up to the meeting from last month, to which I presented some of the issues regarding 339 plan, regarding our suicide ideology and rates for mental health have definitely increased. The follow-up article in the editorial was talking about how important it is to have minority groups, meet with some minority personnel, within our school district. We need to be able to reach that demographic. And when you're considering school counseling roles and our request for 6 school counselors. I had read in the paper that 2 counselors were being considered for the high schools. While I would never deny that that is a definite and imminent need, the request is for 6, and I will solidly stand behind that. But it was interesting in the editorial how they discussed the importance of, minority personnel, dealing with our minority population. And additionally, there was a letter to the editor from a counselor in another state stating the importance of addressing mental health issues. I cannot impress or impose upon you enough the seriousness and the issues that our students are facing. We are poverty-ridden, there is no doubt about it. And with that, people are moving into Scranton because Scranton provides those necessary resources. We are the hub. And school counselors are addressing those needs. Just today, I want to publicly acknowledge the Parker Hill Church. Over 50 brand new winter coats arrived today at West Scranton Intermediate students. But I want to let you know that was around lunch period, and they left on a dozen students' backs because of a school counselor who is working with making sure that those kids are provided for. A dozen kids that we knew of right off the bat did not have a winter coat. More coats will be out the door tomorrow. Any state funding, any federal funding, any carved out monies that you could find within this school district, I cannot think of a more important or prominent role than the school counselors working with our students in our schools day in, day out, making sure that they are getting primary necessary services. So please, if there's any funding to be had, please fund those other positions. Thank you. Have a blessed holiday.
Thank you. Rosemary Boland.
Good evening, directors. I echo what Mrs. Barnansky just told you. We've just gone through a crisis in our district, and perhaps if we had an extra counselor at that school, the situation might have been different. You're going to look at the LERTA program tonight. I have spoken against that, and you had a moment of silence for Director Hartman. When he was on the board, this proposition came up before, and for the reason some of you expressed last week, I'm opposed to it. It seems every time we give people 10 years free reign in this town, they take off, they move out, and they relocate, and we didn't get anything for it, except stuck. That brings me to the single tax office. As all of you are aware, the single tax office has taken to court at the magisterial level right now people who have not paid up on their business privilege and mercantile taxes. So the city is budgeting approximately, I'm going to say about $200,000, which would be pretty low. But significantly for this district, that would mean better than $1 million for the district, since we would get about 5 times more than the city gets. And I'm wondering if that has been looked at as far as this budget is concerned going forward. If it hasn't, a simple phone call to the single tax office will get you the information that you need. There's some extremely qualified people working in that office, and they know what is going on, and I'm sure they could address the amount of monies that will probably come into the Scranton School District as a result of them taking action, taking people to court. With that, we want to tell you, and this is no secret, we don't have substitute teachers. You are keenly aware of it. We've addressed this issue at numerous board levels, board meetings. Now what we find is that classes are doubling up. Now what does that mean? Well, if you take 26 and you double that, you get 52. And I have learned that some of our classes, our teachers are covering 52 kids in a day. Now that would be fine if we were talking about 100 years ago in a one-room schoolhouse, but it is not fine in 2018 for this district or any district. I can't even begin to say to you the safety of the students sitting on the floor because there's no desk, 52 kids in the classroom, way over the regs for the fire department in this town, and way over the regs for the state. This is something that you, the board, must address immediately. And if this company that's been hired can't do it, and they can't, we need to go back to the way we did business before. We had a secretary in the administration building who did that job beautifully, and we had our substitutes in place. If the business that you've hired, you've contracted with can't do this job, then get rid of them. Because we cannot have 50+ kids in a class. That's ridiculous. And it needs to be addressed. And also, I hope you take time over the weekend, next week, to address the fact that we still in some of our buildings have mice, and the waste product from those mice in classrooms. That is toxic, and I hope that gets addressed quickly before the nesting season sets in. Thank you, and we wish you a very blessed holiday. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to a motion for the consent agenda.
Pardon me, sorry, we need to post it.
I'm sorry.
Please pull the B10 from the consent agenda. I need to recuse myself. What is that?
B10.
B10. I'm going to recuse myself from that vote. I hold a commercial lease with the current vendor, so.
So that's being pulled from the consent, right?
B10 is being pulled. Director Gilmartin is recusing herself.
All right. I would also like to pull B7, C1, J2, and M2.
Say that again, Director Schuster, B7.
B7, C1, J2, and M2.
Let's get those pulled. B7, C1,
Okay.
J2, and N2.
N like Nancy or M?
N like Nancy, right, Director
Yes,
Schuster?
and yes.
Director Schuster, N like Nancy too?
And like Nancy, too.
All right,
M2.
so we have
N2.
B7, C1, J6, right?
Yep.
And N as in Nancy, 2.
N2.
Is it J2?
And J2?
Or
Just J2.
just J2? And then
Okay, these are the final numbers. B7, C1, J6, and N2.
J2 and N2, as well as C2. That's what
B7, C1, you said J2?
Better include B10.
Would you like me to go over the whole thing? I'm going to start from the beginning.
Yeah,
B7,
B7,
B10, C1, C2, J2, and N2.
Bingo.
Don't clear your cards yet.
B7, B10,
C2
Well,
is already.
C2 has recently been added, so C2 as well.
C1 and C2?
Is C2 on our agenda?
C2 is already a non-consent.
C2 is in non-consent,
All right.
okay? B7, B10, C1, J2, and N2.
No J6.
J6 or no?
J6 has recently been added if you guys would like to discuss.
I can't hear.
J6 has recently been added if you would like to discuss it.
Like to
But I'm all right with it.
We
Okay.
discussed
I'm okay with it.
J6 at the last budget.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're clear, so Virginia has it for the record. B7, it's hard to hear. B10, which is the one Katie pulled and she's recusing herself from. C1, J2, and J6.
Or N2, there's not J6. I believe I got that consensus, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, correct.
Not J6. N2.
What about J2?
Yes.
Okay. So J6 goes back in the consent. Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Pople?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Budget and Finance, Director Schuster. So are you starting with B7?
So where we're at here, Mr. Lappy, would you like to discuss our two things, or would you like us to move ahead with these resolutions prior to discussion? Would we like Pat to discuss our two options for
Yeah.
16?
Okay, so presented in front of you this evening for the budget resolution is, we have two scenarios presented for you. As we left our meeting on December 17th, we had discussed a budget deficit shortfall of $5,583,330.
Mr. Leffey, can you look that up? We're having a hard time hearing.
So, is this better?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. So as of December 17th, the budget deficit for that evening was $5,583,330. When we had discussed some of the adjustments to it, we had talked about removing the Dean of Students, funding crisis counselors through Title IV funding, and funding college and career pairs through Title IV funding as well. Those adjustments reduced our expenditure budget by $378,000. So as we are here this evening, the current deficit sits at $5,205,320. Both scenarios in front of you for your consideration include an expenditure of $166,004,068. Scenario 1 maintains our current real estate millage at 128.47 mils. That's a real estate tax revenue of $39,500,000. Scenario 2 increases the real estate millage by the Act 1 limit of 3.6% up to 133.0949 mils. That would raise your real estate revenue to $41,058,768, or an increase of $1,558,768. That would reduce the budget deficit that we would need to look to borrow to $3,646,552.
So at this point in time, with the two options, we can either borrow the full 5.5.
It'd be 5.2. It's 5,205,320 at our current real estate.
And then the other option was to lower that by increasing the tax millage to the cap.
To the Act 1 cap, not the approved exception level.
Yes.
As you've been presented at various meetings, there's about a 9-level chart that we prepared. The Act 1 limit is almost directly in the middle at 3.6%. And that would reduce the necessary borrowing to $3,646,552.
So we discussed at the last meeting that doing this, there might be a possibility that we wouldn't have to go to the capital markets to borrow. Can we is there any update on this at this point in time, or is there any certainty of that?
I wouldn't say there's any certainty. I certainly think it would make a bank loan more feasible. You know, being with that lower number, that would obviously be the first option that we would look to obtain once we bid out and approve a financial advisor. That would be the first thing that they would be working on. But there's certainly no guarantee.
All right. If we were to do that, do we have any kind of estimate on what interest costs would be? Any kind of estimate on what savings it would be?
What we did was we built in the additional interest expense of about $150,000.
Yes.
Last year we added $300,000 for the borrowing. That was roughly around I'm going to say $9 million, including the capital project funds of $4 million. That $300,000 budget came in on actual at $280,000. So we kind of reduced it a little bit, but interest rates are a little bit higher currently right now. So we wanted to be conservative with $150,000.
So if we were to raise taxes to the cap, in order to have the possibility of maybe bank borrowing rather than capital markets, we're looking to save about $128,000.
Excuse me. At this point, we wanted to include the $150,000 in there. I can't predict what interest rates will be given at this time.
I mean, I'm just looking for a roundabout, you know, whether it's going to be.
It's certainly going to be less expensive than a capital market fund.
Pat, with what Ms. Bolin brought up about the single tax office, I saw you writing it down. Did you already look into that factor, or have you not explored that when preparing?
So we had met with the single tax office, I can say in October or November, looking at some of our projections. You know, they did make note of some increased collections on the business privilege area. The actual budget is based off of where we are projecting to end this year, which would include some of those collections possibly. I would certainly reach out to Mr. Fox, but to say that it's increased by $1 million, it certainly has not. We budgeted $7.5 million for those two line items in 2018. We're looking to come in right at about 7.4, and that's where your 2019 budget sits.
Pat, I guess this is directed toward Mr. Breton. Is PFM giving us some guidance on which direction to go?
Well, as I stated at our last finance meeting, my recommendation is that, you know, in order for the board to show a good faith effort in terms of participation in the increase, going to the index would be very reasonable. I don't know that anybody would recommend to go to the maximum. Taxpayers are certainly at a peak at this point, and your tax effort is very reputable. But in order to avoid, let's say, some negative approach by the state, I would think that you're going to need to see some an increase. And certainly, they've given you the opportunity by establishing the index, and that would be certainly more good faith effort. I talked to other individuals who have served with me in this capacity at PFM, and they agree with what I said on Monday, how they approach it also.
Thank you.
All right. Do we know offhand where we stand with tax effort? I know we mentioned the number a couple times. Out of
districts across the Commonwealth?
Yeah, just across the Commonwealth.
I believe Director Duffy had mentioned that we're probably 49,
I want to say between 39 and 49. I don't have very up-to-date information, but as of very recently, we're under 50 out of 500.
Yeah, looking at the our tax breakdown, I mean, we've raised taxes. We've only not raised taxes 6 times in 25 years.
There's been good reasons in the past for raising taxes, and a few of those reasons. One is the campus that those children enjoy down there, Scranton High School, Memorial Stadium, that whole area. The elementary schools, Tripp, Whittier. the work that was done on John Kennedy, a total expansion on John Kennedy, and the many, many things that needed to be done to this district due to the fact, and you're sitting in a building here that's very aged, and if you look around, you'll see how nice it is in here, and yeah, that was taxpayer money, and that was done by our people. And yes, we did have to raise taxes at times, but it was for good reasons, and it was with the children in mind. So, a lot of renovations, a lot of cost, big cost, and I think you can attest to that. Am I correct?
That's correct, yes. And one other factor you might want to not forget also is that the rate at which PSERS has been increasing and what that effect is on us, and the index almost doesn't even cover that amount.
So if we were to go to the banks rather than going to the capital gains or the capital markets, what fees would we be waiving?
See, the setup of the capital markets borrow is expensive. It includes more legal services, more bond insurance, all kinds, bond counsel, those kinds of things that get involved. With a bank loan, you'd be going out as much as you did in your training, that you're looking at this evening. We look at we go to the banks and we see if there's a bank that would provide us with approximately a 10-year loan or whatever with this amount. We can go out 20 years and we'd be paying for it as long, and obviously you save some interest. I don't guarantee what's going to happen to the interest that went up, just today in the market. And I'm not sure how that would impact it. Certainly it's going to impact it a little bit, but overall, the thought is that there's going to be a more economical way to approach it. And again, depending on how the state looks upon it, they may make funds available through this empowerment process that we go through. They've often had money available that districts could borrow for periods of time without any interest at all. So that's part of what we're doing. Maybe in regards as the state looks upon your situation, brings in more support.
I think the struggle I'm having here is that we are making this decision tonight that is absolutely going to have an impact. If we pass whatever tax raise we pass, that absolutely happens. And we're doing it in exchange for so many ifs. We may not be able to borrow from the banks. We may not get the additional state funding. And when you look at the article that was in the paper on Sunday that we talked about at last week's meeting, our students they deserve this money. They need this money. This money is due us, and we keep putting this burden on ourselves and our community, and we don't have any guarantee of what I completely understand an act of good faith and a little bit here and a little bit there. I'm certainly in favor of that, but these are such big question marks, and if we make this decision tonight, it's happening.
We're elected here to do exactly what we're going to do tonight, whether it be raise or not raise taxes, okay? That's probably the most important decision you're going to make while you're a school director on this board. I just got to say, we've got a lot of promises, we got a lot of this, we got a lot of that. I'm very grateful for the money that the state has given us, all the above. But again, there's people looking at us to do certain things, have the courage, not doing the popular thing, okay, but having the courage to say, yes, unfortunately, we may have to raise taxes. Unfortunately, we have to show banks and we have to show lending individuals that we do have the courage to move forward, okay? In my 20 years experience on this board, did I ever like raising taxes? No. Did I have to? Yes. It's almost a given thing. I hate to say that, but it's almost a given thing. We just don't have fixed things. We have things that always are on the increase. We always are at the mercy of a governor. And we were at the mercy of a governor that cut funding for 4 years, and we are still trying to dig out of that hole. And you know what? The state's not going to help us dig out of this hole, okay? There's a couple of things that are left for us to do. So we need to do that. We need to have the courage to step forward. But I certainly do agree with you, Katie, but there's something we need to do tonight. We need to show the lending institutions and others that we have the courage to do.
And I think my struggle with this, Mr. Lesh, is that you stated very positive reasons
Yes.
for raising taxes.
Yes.
And we are faced with one that is simply plugging a hole that we didn't fully create. You
No,
know, we can.
absolutely not. We have been forced to borrow due to Governor Corbett, former Governor Corbett. He had really put this district on its knees. Not just district, but many districts in the state. But as Mr. Duffy, due to his due diligence, and a few other members on this board, have really looked in and found out how grossly underfunded we are per student, besides all those drastic cuts we had taken from former Governor Corbett.
I echo what both of you are saying, and I am struggling as well. It seems all we've been doing is looking at numbers since we got on this board, but we got to shift this focus to kids.
Absolutely.
And this focus has to go to kids, and we have to be heard down in Harrisburg in numbers, because we can't do any more. They need to step in, and they need to help us educate these kids, and they deserve it.
So what is the will of the board? Would we like to go with scenario 1 or scenario 2? We could put it into the Budget and Finance Committee.
I, for one, Tom, would go with the midline tax increase, 3.6 mils. I believe that shows work on our part. That shows the lending institutions that, we're willing to do our part. I was encouraged by some of the things you said, that there might be some alternatives out there with banks that may give us a better interest rate and certain things that may save us some money in the long run. And $150,000 is not a drop in the bucket. So I personally, it's only my opinion, only one of 9 here, but I agree with, and I'll say it flat out, 3.6 mil.
So, Mr. Audi, we have 2 members of the Budget and Finance Committee here. We can put it to a vote in the committee, have President Dixon be the 3rd vote, or we could go with 5 votes to choose which scenario we're going to go with.
I think that we can, I think we should have a vote on both options. It would start with option 1 and then have a roll call vote and then option 2.
Okay?
Just to make it clear, option 1 is an increase of 3.6 mils.
Option 1 is 0 increase.
I'm sorry. What is option 2? An increase of?
It's a 3.6%.
3.6%, which is how many mils?
4.6249.
Pardon me?
Just over 4.6. 4.6249
Mils.
That's option 2.
There's an alternative in between that the board wants to have. I think in terms of percentage of millage, we can do that as well. But whatever options are available, we need to put them for a vote.
Would anyone else like a different option?
I just want to add one thing, Mr. Laffey. I know it's 4.6% mill increase. Sounds like an awful lot to a lot of people, I know that. But what are the risks that we take, first of all, with an institution not looking favorably at us to borrow, okay? And what about if we do borrow, I mean, we're just kicking the can down the road, pushing this debt out further, am I correct? I mean, eventually the rooster are going to come home and they're going to crow. All right, we're going to be caught with this debt. It's not going to reduce at all.
Well, there's borrowing in both of these.
Yes, there's borrowing both of them. Capital markets borrowing, again, as Mr. Gretton stated, from a fee structure is typically more expensive. It may involve
for a district like Scranton with our financial situation, it may involve bond insurance, which can be expensive as well. The type of borrowing we do, unfortunately, we've had to do it many years now in a row. And our debt service expenditure line item has grown dramatically. It's just about $18 million now. I'm not exactly sure where it was 5 years ago, but it certainly wasn't that high. So it's an unfortunate situation that we're in.
There's no question that this district is underfunded by the state, and it's not any sort of a plot or anything like that. It's the district receives money from the state in various categories based on formulas. It's my opinion that some of the formulas are unfair to districts like the city of Scranton. They're geared towards rural districts, and I've said this before at the public meetings, especially the one that stands out to me the most is the transportation reimbursement. Transportation reimbursement is based on, the biggest factor in that is the mileage, the total mileage that buses run. Naturally, urban districts such as the city of Scranton doesn't have very long bus runs as far as the mileage is concerned. But it doesn't mean that it's cheaper to run a bus in the city of Scranton than it would be out in Western Wayne or something like that. It's because of the location and the type of area that we have. It's actually more costly, the insurance, etc. And another thing I'd like to point out is it sounds ridiculous, to say, well, by increasing taxes we're going to save money. We are going to save money. We have to get into a program where we're paying for our own operations. That's my goal. Is the reason I'm here. I'd like to see this district at the end of a fiscal year have a zero balance, and we can get there. It's a possibility to get there. But I think without raising taxes this year, we're putting ourselves in danger with the type of help that we're trying to get from the state. As was noted tonight, we have to show some faith, some good faith to the people who are monitoring us, that we are trying to be fiscally responsible. And this is a key part of it. And along with that, one of the things I would like to point out, during this year, we have to aggressively look at areas where we can save money. We can't wait until just the night of the budget and try to come up with everything. This budget that we're talking about, we have to look at for next year. We have to look at every aspect of our expenditures and where we can cut without cutting programs, without hurting education. That's all I have to say.
So we'll take a roll call on scenario one. Are we doing a question?
Do we have a resolution for scenario one?
We don't have a resolution. We have two options in front of us.
So we're just going to vote on the options?
We're just going to vote on the option.
Okay.
You have resolutions in front of you for both scenarios. They're included in the packet.
Yep.
So are we making a motion to vote on scenario one?
So I'll make a motion to vote on scenario one.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Anybody on the question?
On the question, just for clarification, scenario one is zero tax increase, correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to be following, my only quote on this or statement on this is I'm going to be following the direction of PFM, and I have a lot of faith in the state that they're going to step up to the plate and help us this year. And that's the reason I'm going to be voting for a tax increase.
I will say I base my decisions on last year we did make expenditure cuts to bring down that side of the budget, so I did feel comfortable last year with the tax increase. However, this year we've increased our budget by $1.5 million. Although there are positions I do think we need, I don't like putting a tax burden on the taxpayer.
On the question for scenario one or option one, I believe that we showed good faith last year. We made very difficult decisions with regards to cutting, and we only received, like say this year we got an extra 6, but they knew we need another 5 because to close the gap there would be 11. I look at it this way, so And we keep hearing this, and Mr. Duffy, you've done some great work with this, but I look at it this way. So all of our brothers and sisters, school districts that are receiving all this extra money or allowance from, say, our parents, the state, why aren't we getting the same allowance? Are we grounded and going to continue to be grounded? So the state might think that it's unreasonable or not in good faith if I vote not to raise taxes, but I feel better about not voting to raise taxes and going back to the people. It's not working, it hasn't worked, and I believe that if we send a message if we put it back on the state.
To go off of that, I also remember what Mrs. Boland's speech the other night. It was something that stuck with me, that when we make a decision, it has consequences. And, you know, when we get things straightened out, the tax burden on the city is still going to be high. And that's the consequence I'm thinking about right now. We have two problems. We have borrowing is a problem, and a tax increase is a problem. We can either create one problem or create two.
I'm also thinking of the other alternative if the state's not happy with us of coming in. So there's a lot on the table. And we have no answers, as Director Martin said.
I look at it in two ways. As board members, Mr. McAndrew, you always say we can only do what we're afforded to be able to do, and we can only do is the information that's in front of us. I can't worry about what some state senator in Erie is going to do when it comes to the negotiation table about Scranton, because he's never going to see any of our 10,000 students. He's never going to represent any of the individuals that are sitting in this auditorium right now. So, frankly, as a school director, when I'm faced with the option of potentially getting out of the capital markets and going for a bank loan, if that's possible, to reduce our extra fees that go towards lawyers that everyone seems to pile on to. I look at it as that's a positive to look at where we were last year in terms of borrowing. Last year we borrowed, what was the figure, in the $9 million range?
Yeah, $4 million of capital projects for the general fund borrow, fiscal fund.
Okay, so I can't worry about what some state rep out in Center County is going to do, or some state senator out in Erie is going to do when it comes to the negotiation table to give this district any extra money. I have to make the best decision, and I understand the ramifications. I voted against a no tax increase 2 years ago, even though I ran for office the following spring. It might have been the unpopular decision, but I'm going to vote for what I believe in, and unfortunately, I can't walk away from not accepting that recommendation. So that's where I stand right now.
I have to agree with Director Casey. We can't just sit idly by here. I'm not going to play Russian roulette with the state, you know, and sacrifice the kids in the process. You know, again, I look back at the 20 years I spent here. All right, maybe 20 years ago they should have had fairer funding, absolutely. Paper has made comments that we've been asleep at the switch. Let me tell you what, no one up here has been asleep at the switch. We've all done our part, okay, to encourage our administration to do the right things by our children. Maybe people don't agree with what we do, but we do the best we can. I mean, we are just people from all walks of life up here, but we all genuinely care. And that's why we vote the way we vote. So I will be in favor of the tax increase.
So are we going to roll call?
Yep.
We're still on the question.
Scenario
just to
one.
clarify, we are doing scenario one first, zero tax increase, but holding the taxes as they are could have potential to expand our tax base in the future. Again, with the recent move by Clark Summit to decrease theirs, and with Scranton on the verge of raising theirs, I think you're going to see some movement there with the, you know, the shrinkage of the tax base.
Okay. Roll call?
Mr. Duffy?
No.
Ms. DeMartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
No.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
No.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
No.
5 negative, 3 affirmative, motion fails.
Okay, I would ask that we do scenario 2.
Put a motion on the table for scenario 2.
So moved. No, I think he has to read the whole thing, because that's all that's left. That's just two. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was just going with the scenarios, and I was going to go back to
Yeah.
B13 and then read them in order.
All right, that's fine.
So we have a motion and a second. On the question? Roll call?
Ms. Martin?
No.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
No?
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
No.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
5 affirmative, 3 negative, motion passes.
Now the resolution.
So would you like me to start with resolution B16, which we just voted on, or would you like me to go back to B13?
B13.
B7?
B7? You want to get this one?
B7.
Yeah.
So resolution B7, to the members of the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton, it's the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Budget and Finance Committee that the following resolution be considered: the exception bill list as per bill payment policy for the period ending December 19th, 2018, be approved as per attached. Respectfully submitted.
Do we have a second?
Second.
On the question?
All right. On the question, I did notice, I've heard some talk about the stop loss with the Vista underwriters and also Millennium. So I was looking to get a little bit of explanation on the stop loss. Mr. Laffey. So I was looking to get an explanation or a...
Yeah, stop loss it's an insurance policy that the district carries to insure any claims that exceed a certain threshold. I believe the threshold is $225,000. So once you have an individual who would accumulate medical claims that exceed that amount, stop loss insurance would kick in, would generate refunds to the district. It's a budgeted line item in our 2019 budget, and it has been for many years. It's about $400,000.
Okay, that was my next question. All right, how about Millennium? They would be considered our...
Millennium is our current healthcare consultant.
All right, when we took a look at bidding out some of our vendors, was this something that was bid out?
Not this year, not as of yet. I believe it's on the timeline was prepared that it would be bid in 2019.
Okay, so because I know there was a savings of about $20,000 with that, correct?
Well, they reduced, I believe they reduced their admin fee, which is about $8,000 a month, by 4% in the 2018 year.
Okay, because I remember when we looked through some of that, there was this $20,000 fee that they said maybe we shouldn't have been paid in the past, that we weren't going to be paying anymore. And I thought
I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. We pay Millennium, it's an $8,000 monthly administrative fee. The $20,000, I'm not exactly sure what that is.
I heard something to this same reference.
I mean, this was something that we discussed when
we will no longer have to pay because we probably never should have paid.
Okay.
Maybe I'm unclear, but
That's our
presented to us.
That's our 403B plan administration cost. That service was bid. We're transitioning to the new vendor January 2019, and there will be about $20,000 savings.
So now, so
two separate services.
Okay. So that was Millennium at one time doing that service for us?
No, we had a different vendor.
Okay. Nothing to do with Millennium?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew? Yes. Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
The next resolution is Resolution B10, that the members of the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton, the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following resolution for your consideration, whereas the Scranton School District, in an effort to achieve savings, contracted with Pro Buyers LLC to conduct a review of the district copying and printing needs and assist in the preparation and execution of professional copier and printing services through an RFP process. And whereas the district has received proposals from 4 qualified bidders to provide copier services to the Scranton School District. Those proposals were reviewed and presentations were conducted by all bidders to a committee of district personnel. And whereas Fraser Advanced Information Systems proposal was the lowest overall pricing received by the district, and the proposed equipment was successfully tested on site in various buildings throughout the district. Therefore, be it resolved that the Scranton School Board of Directors approves the lease proposal of Fraser Advanced Information Systems and authorizes the administration and the district solicitor to review and execute all contracts related to this matter respectively submitted.
Second.
On the question?
Yes, on the question, since the bidder made and brought in what I would say is some new information, claiming that he's $275,000 under the lowest bid, I'd like some clarification on that. Am I correct?
I believe they are with Fraser, so they were speaking about their proposal as opposed to some of the others that were prepared. We provided a summary for you to show the savings for all 4, the savings of all 4 vendors, and Fraser is the lowest.
They were the lowest bidder as far as copiers went?
That is correct.
How come we didn't accept their bid?
We did. We're recommending that.
Oh, currently. I'm sorry. My apologies. I misunderstood.
Roll call?
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Abstain.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
7 affirmative, 1 abstention, motion passes.
All right, moving on to B13. School District of the City of Scranton, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, resolution authorizing the incurring of tax and revenue anticipation debt and the issuance of a tax and revenue anticipation note in the maximum principal amount of $14 million, accepting the offer of First National Bank and establishing the terms of the note. At this point in time, I do read the whole piece, right, Mr. Lackey? Whereas the School District of the City of Scranton, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, anticipates current revenues as yet uncollected, and whereas the school district requires additional funds for current and anticipated expenditures to fund anticipated deficits, and whereas the school district has determined that it is necessary to borrow for the purpose of meeting current and anticipated expenses for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019, by issuing a note to be repaid from the receipt of the anticipated taxes and revenues, and whereas First National Bank of Pennsylvania has submitted the school district a proposal to purchase the proposal tax and revenue anticipation note of 2019 of the school district dated December 14th, 2018, and the school district desires by the adoption of this resolution to accept such proposal and authorize the issuance of sale of its tax and revenue anticipation note. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of School Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton, it is hereby resolved that the authority of said board as follows. Number 1, the school district hereby authorizes the issuance of tax and revenue tax anticipation note in the maximum principal amount of $14 million in anticipation of the receipt of current taxes and revenues to be sold at private sale. The school district has determined it to be in the best financial interest to award the sale by private negotiation. The tranche shall be in the denomination of $14 million, shall be redeemable at any time at the option of the school district without penalty or premium, shall be fully registered without coupons, shall be dated at the earliest date possible under the law, bear interest at the fixed rate set forth in option 1 of the proposal, which interest shall be payable at maturity, shall mature on December 31st, 2019, and shall be payable at the Scranton office of the bank, and shall be substantially in the form annexed to the resolution as Exhibit A, hereby made part of this resolution as through fully set forth in this place. The tran issued pursuant in the resolution shall be a general obligation of the school district. The school district hereby covenants with the owners from time to time of the Tran that if funds are not available for the full payment of the Tran within the fiscal year in which issued, then the school district will either, one, include the amounts necessary to pay the Tran to its budget for the next fiscal year pursuant to Section 8125 of the Debt Act to the extent then permitted by applicable law. Fund such amounts with the next fiscal year in accordance with Sections 8129 and 8130 of the Debt Act, or provide for payments of the Tran by any combination of 1 and 2, in all events upon notice to and with the consent of agreement of the bank. Number 4, the school district hereby covenants with the owners from time to time of the Tran that it will make no use of the proceeds of the Tran which such use has been reasonably expected on the date of issue of the Tran would have caused the Tran to be an arbitrage bond within the meaning of Section 148 of the Code and the regulations thereunder, and it will comply with the requirements of the International Revenue Code of 1986 as amended and the regulations throughout the term of the Tran. Number 5, if the principal amount of the Tran plus the principal amount of other tax-exempt obligations issued and to be issued by the school district or by a subordinate governmental unit within its jurisdiction during the calendar year in which the Tran is to be issued exceeds $15 million. And if the gross proceeds of the Tran are invested at a yield greater than the yield on the Tran and are not expended or deemed to have been expended pursuant of Sections 148 F4B3 of the Code within 6 months from the date of issuance, the school district covenants that it will rebate it to the U.S. Treasury within 60 days after the maturity date of the Tran, that the amount of the investment income on the Tran proceeds which exceed the amount which would have been earned had the Tran proceeds been invested at a yield equal to the yield on the Tran. Number 6, the proposal is hereby accepted and shall be incorporated into this resolution as Exhibit B. Hereto, the President and the Secretary of the Board of School Directors are hereby authorized and directed to execute and deliver a duplicate original of the proposal to the bank. 7, the Tran is designated as a qualified tax-exempt bond, as that the term is defined in Section 265 of the Code as amended. No part of the proceeds of the Tran shall at any time be used directly or indirectly to acquire securities or other obligations, the acquisition of which should cause the Tran to be an arbitrage bond and defined in this Code. Number 8, the Tran shall be secured by a pledge of and a lien and charge on taxes and all other revenues of the school district to be received during the period when the Tran will be outstanding, including during any period of default. The President of the Board, the President or Vice President of the Board of School Directors, be and hereby is authorized and directed to execute and deliver in the name of, on behalf of, and under the seal of the school district, the Tran in the form and containing terms described above, and the Secretary of the Board of School Directors be and hereby is authorized and directed to attest to the same. The Treasurer of the Board of School Directors be and hereby is authorized and directed to prepare or cause to prepare a certificate as to taxes and revenues being collected and a certificate of cumulative deficit as required by Section 8126 of the Local Government Unit Debt Act of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as amended. The officers of the Board of School Directors be and hereby are authorized and directed to perform all acts which are necessary and proper for the valid issuance and security of the Tran, including the preparation and execution of a tax certificate. Resolved this 19th day of December, 2018. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? Roll call.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
To the members of the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton, the Superintendent of Schools, and the Budget and Finance Committee present the following resolution for your consideration. Whereas the Public School Code of 1949, as amended, allows for a budget transfer from one classification of expenditure to another by the Board of Directors in the last 9 months of the fiscal year, if it is apparent that the necessary surplus funds do exist in another appropriation. And whereas the school district adopted Board Policy 612 has established the guidelines for reporting such necessary budget transfers to the Board of Directors, therefore be it resolved that the proposed budget transfer request be approved as per attached. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question?
The question, what's the amount?
There should have been an updated resolution.
Would this be, it's still be 14? so this is, it just clarifies that. So I'm going to add this, if I could put a friendly amendment to add these last two paragraphs.
I'll second that.
And whereas it is necessary at the end of the fiscal year to make budget adjustments to reflect the actual expenditures within each budget classification, therefore be it resolved, the Scranton School Board of Directors approves the business manager and superintendent of schools to make such adjustments where necessary to close out the 2018 fiscal year. A summary of budget transfer adjustments will be reported to the Scranton School Board of Directors once all entries and transactions for fiscal year 2018 are completed. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
So this just says after adjustments are made, the board will be notified.
So we don't have another question.
Standard practice. Receivables will be booked for 2018 for collections earned in 2019. Once that's finalized, a summary of any adjustments that we make, again, it would not increase revenues, it would not increase expenditures, shifting them from one object or function code to another to balance.
So at this point in time, we don't know once those adjustments are made.
So we'll do a roll call on the friendly amendment.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
On the question on the original amendment,
Pat answered that.
we're good. So we're roll call?
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Agenda item B15 to the members of the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton, the Superintendent of Schools, and the Budget and Finance Committee present the following resolution for your consideration. Whereas the Scranton School District Board of Directors resolves to enter into a payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the Polish National Catholic Church, and whereas the district has been presented with such agreement and will receive $2,500 annually in lieu of real estate taxes. Therefore, be it resolved that the Scranton School Board of Directors approves the pilot agreement with the Polish National Catholic Church. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question?
On the question, I'd really like to thank the Polish National Church for coming forward here with the pilot.
I echo those statements, and if we could actually send out, when we get 5 minutes to breathe, a letter to other churches in the area, if we can see if they would be amenable to something of this, it would greatly help.
And I know the other day we did speak about some of the business at the University of Scranton, some things that have been renting out the mall and the hospitals as well. And we continue to stay on that to see if there's anything else there that we could do to bring in some additional funds.
Roll call?
Ms. Dixon?
Yeah.
Mr. Addy would like to add some follow-up to that.
Okay.
The board had asked me to look into whether or not that would be a possibility, and every indication is that it is a possibility. I did look into it and was able to find some cases that would support our ability to do that.
Thank you very much for that follow-up.
Very well.
Thank you, Attorney Audi. Okay, roll call?
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
So now we're moving into the agenda item B16. So the contents of this is the Scranton School Board 2019 budget contents. Number 1 is the 2019 budget. Number 2 is real estate taxes. Number 3 is 511 taxes, levy of the earned income, mercantile business privilege, mercantile tax, business privilege tax, local service tax, realty transfer tax. Number 4 is general conditions. 5 is appointment of tax collector. 6 is appointment of tax collector. 7, designation of depositories for tax collection. 8, appointment of administrative review officer. And 9, taxpayer bill of rights and a disclosure statement. So with this, I do read through the whole packet and we vote on it as a whole. Is that correct, or they're all separate items? So the Scranton School Board resolution to file solicitor number 1 of 2019 budget. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton hereby authorizes the expenditure of $166,004,068 upon adoption of the budget for the year 2019, copies of which are carried hereby and available to the public. Be it further resolved that the District Secretary shall file and advise the budget in accordance with the law. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Pople?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Resolution to file of solicitor number 2 of 2019, the real estate tax levy. Be it further resolved that the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton hereby levies a tax increase of 133.0949 mils per $1,000 assessed valuation on real estate pursuant to the authority of the Act of the General Assembly, March 10th, 1949, PL 30, ART 6, Section 672, as amended. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
No.
Mr. Pople?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
No.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
5 affirmative, 3 negative, motion passes.
Resolution to file of solicitor number 3, 2019, Local Tax Enabling Act of 1965, 511 taxes. Be it further and separately resolved that under authority of the Local Tax Enabling Act of 1965, Act 511, PL 1257, Act of the Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and in compliance with the school laws of Pennsylvania as amended, there is levied, claimed, and imposed taxes for the calendar year 2019, and that all 511 taxes hereafter levied under the Local Tax Enabling Act of 1965 are intended to generate the maximum amounts of tax revenue followed and permitted by law, and that where the City of Scranton and/or Scranton School District of the City of Scranton have perfected claims to proportionate shares of any of the hereinafter recited Act 511 taxes, that these claims shall persist and remain in force and effect, and where a maximum legal levy has been hereby made, that the same shall only be adjusted or reduced in accordance with law to that amount which shall represent the proportionate share of the School District of the City of Scranton. And the subjects and subject matter of taxes levied in the School District of the City of Scranton for the year 2019 are intended to be within the limits of the School District of the City of Scranton, coterminous with the City of Scranton, while an aggregate of taxes collected by similar levies, if any, by the City of Scranton are separate, distinct, and apart from the taxes levied hereunder as the School District of the City of Scranton, unless otherwise provided by law, and shall be collected by tax collectors herein named and appointed, or hereinafter named and appointed, for which purpose there is continued levied, and impose the following 511 taxes. Separate resolutions for each will follow. Levy 1 is there an income tax. Levy 2 is the mercantile business privilege tax license. Levy 3 is the mercantile tax. Levy 4 is the business privilege tax. Levy 5 is the occupational privilege tax. Levy 6 is the realty transfer tax. Therefore, the above taxes are continued for 2019 and shall continue in full force and effect unless repealed or amended by law or action of successor school boards. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Pople?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Now, I just included all of those, Pat. Am I going through each tax levy separately as well? Yes.
Mr. Audi?
Mr. Rowdy.
No, you've incorporated those, it's fine.
So we don't have to go through every one of these?
Do not have to.
Went through.
And they're available for anyone in the audience who wants to see them.
Okay, thank you.
Resolution to file of solicitor number 4 of 2019, general conditions. In order to fully effectuate the tax levies, their implementation and collection, the district secretary and/or the district solicitor are hereby authorized and directed to act upon behalf of the school district in all matters necessary in carrying out the intent hereof, including but not limited to legal advertisement of the same where required. All of said levies are made in order to fulfill the general accounts of the school district and the conduct of a thorough and efficient public school system entrusted to the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton. Accordingly, all of the actions are collectively and individually intended to continue and affect all previous actions taken on like and similar matters, subject only to any amendments therein. To affect the tenor of all previous enactments or funds appropriated on matters herein set forth shall be so adjusted, conformed, and compounded, including but not limited to budget appropriations made to or on behalf of Act 511 tax collector and the administrative and salaried staff as supervised by him, and the rules and regulations as published with the enactment or reenactment of Act 511 taxes, which action shall be commenced January 1st, 2019. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Resolution to file of solicitor number 5 of 2019, appointment of the real estate and/or 511 tax collector. Be it resolved that William Fox and/or his legal successor is recognized and/or appointed as the collector of taxes for the year 2019, or until withdrawn by action of the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton for levies as follows. Number 1, the real estate taxes. Number 2, local service tax. Number 3, business privilege tax. Number 4, mercantile tax. Number 5, school license tax. Be it further resolved that the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton shall require the posting of adequate bonds in conformity with law and/or based upon previous practice in the same premises, which shall be properly approved by court and/or the district solicitor and filed with the district secretary. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Resolution to file of solicitor number 6 of 2019, appointment of the 511 tax collector / earned income tax collector. Whereas the Scranton School District has levied, assessed, and provided for the collection of certain local taxes in compliance with and pursuant to the authority of the Local Tax Enabling Act of 1965, Act 511 PL 1257 of the Act of the Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and in compliance with the local school laws of Pennsylvania. And whereas the Scranton School District is a member of the Lackawanna County Tax Collection Committee pursuant to Act 32 of 2008, and whereas the TCC has hired Berkheimer Associates to collect earned income taxes as levied by the school district, including said earned income taxes that are or may be delinquent, and whereas pursuant to Act 192 of 2003-2004, General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Scranton School District has the right to impose a cost of collection on earned income taxes that become delinquent and or remain due and unpaid. Now therefore be it resolved that the Scranton School District hereby authorizes the following. Number 1, the Scranton School District appoints Berkheimer Associates as its earned income tax collector for the initial tax year beginning January 1st, 2019 and continuing through December 31st of 2019. The Scranton School District approves and adopts the cost of collection schedule attached hereto as Exhibit A and made part of the resolution to be imposed by Berkheimer Associates and any taxpayer whose earned income tax becomes delinquent and or remain due and unpaid. And 3, Berkheimer Associates is authorized to retain said cost of collection set forth in the attached cost of collection schedule incurred in recovering delinquent taxes and assessed to the delinquent taxpayer as allowed by law. Number 4, this authorizing resolution is effective immediately and upon approval.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Resolution to file of solicitor number 7, 2019, designation of depositories for tax collections. Be it resolved that First National Bank, Clark Summit, Pennsylvania, be hereby designated depository in which the funds and monies in the custody of William Fox and Berkheimer Associates or their legal successors may be deposited. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Resolution to file of solicitor number 8, 2019, subject appointment of administrative hearing officer. Be it resolved that William Fox and or his legal successor is recognized and or appointed as the administrative hearing officer pursuant to Act 50, 1998 and Section 8430, subsection 4, shall continue to provide the taxpayer review or appeal process as was offered on the effective date of this statute, Act 50 of 1998. Be it resolved that any and all forms, rules, as well as practices or procedures previously utilized by the tax collector on the effective date of this statute be adopted. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question, roll call?
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Resolution to file of solicitor number 9, 2019, subject taxpayer bill of rights / disclosure statement, be it resolved that pursuant to Act 50 of 1998 at section 8423, the attached taxpayer bill of rights and disclosure statement be adopted. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question, roll call?
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Need a bottle of water, Director Schuster?
No, I'm good. You can keep going. B17, the approval of the LERTA, I do not have. To the members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, is the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Budget and Finance Committee that the following be approved. Whereas the improvement of deteriorating real property or areas Tax Exemption Act 72 PS 4711-101, enacted by the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, authorizes local tax authorities to exempt improvements to certain deteriorating residential properties and areas. Whereas the New Home Construction Local Tax Abatement Act 7 PS 4754-1, enacted by the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, authorizes local taxing authorities to exempt improvements to certain unimproved residential real property. And whereas the school district of the City of Scranton, in an effort to expand its tax base, desires to further encourage improvement to deteriorating property in areas within the City of Scranton, and therefore be it resolved, the Scranton School Board, in conjunction with the City of Scranton and Lackawanna County, hereby approve the attached and requested by the Council of the City of Scranton. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question,
On the question, the other day we made a request of how the LERTA would be affected by a board vote if the board decided not to.
Yes, I have follow-up information as you requested. So if the school district chooses not to participate in the proposed LERTA program, the city can do it alone. The legal answer is yes, and I'm quoting Bob Durkin and his team. The board could conceivably not vote to participate. But practically speaking, failure by the district to partner with the city on this would likely result in the city rescinding the measure for several reasons. And this is what is listed. Without both taxing bodies in agreement, the county would probably not approve the action. Given that the district represents the highest percentage of property tax liability, the appeal to prospective participants would greatly be diminished. Separate standards for the city and the school district would add confusion to an already challenging property tax alignment. The situation would negate one of the strengths of the concepts that a unified community initiative that signals to homeowners and businesses that all parties are working together for the long-term betterment of the city and its citizens. So another question was, what would prevent someone from leaving after the 10 years of the abatement are up? From the standpoint of tax revenue, the question is moot. After 10 years, the property owner, be it a homeowner or a business, will be responsible for payment of the new higher liability on the entire property, the base and the improvement. There would be no incentive or benefit to moving, as they would owe the taxes irrespective of occupancy. So those are the two questions that you asked. I provided the answers, and I believe we have Amy Leitster from the chamber here if you have additional questions.
I just want clarification. I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So both on the commercial and the residential, we're not losing revenue from the taxes.
That's
We're
correct.
losing revenue from any kind of improvements.
That is
So we're
correct.
not losing revenue on this.
That's correct.
Okay. Can you go to the microphone so we can hear you?
Thank you.
I'd like to add that this only applies to property taxes, not to wages or any other measurables.
Okay.
And I believe to clarify, the abatement is only on improvements to a property.
That is correct.
So if there's land, we're still getting the taxes on the land.
That is correct, unless there's site work done on the land to improve it.
Amy, I think there are some other questions.
Any other questions?
I would simply, and I apologize, Amy, and you've been here a long time, I would make a motion to table this. I think there are so many good points about all of this, and I have a lot of reasons to be in favor of it, and yet I have a nagging angst about tax abatements just in general, and my own fault and situation of being in the business I'm in at this time of year, I have not had enough time to review the information to ask you the questions I'd like to ask. And I've had several conversations about this. This is a very long motion, I apologize. I've had a lot of conversations about this, where the point about how successful it was in Pittsburgh and Allentown and Philadelphia has been made. Those are very different cities from ours, so I would like to understand how their successes would apply to us, and I'd like a little time to look into that. But I also am not of the opinion that this should go on and on and on. I'd love to see this tabled and brought forth in January or early in February.
I'd second that motion. Is it a possibility to get a presentation?
I'm sorry, I can't.
So I'm going to second the motion to table. Is there a possibility to get a presentation on the successes of other cities that have used something like this?
I have some information that Mr. Durkin said. So he sent information about local residential tax abatement, and he talked about the village at Tripp Park. He said that that was a 10-year KOZ, and the prior market valuation was $261,600. 138 new homes were built there, and the post-market valuation is $22,625,934. He also says that Philadelphia residential, he's looking at projection 2026, they will have an additional $169.4 million in annual real estate tax and a home building increase of 367%. He gave examples of local commercial. North Point Development in Wilkes-Barre had 172 acres, 200 million of a community investment, and a creation of 2,000 jobs. And then he gave an example of Lehigh Valley commercial. 4,092 full-time jobs were created, $9 million in tax revenue. So that is what he provided as examples. And he did go over these the other night when he did his presentation, and just is repeating those examples for you.
And if I may, I'd just like to add that Pittston and Hanover are also LERTA approved, so sister communities within our geographic footprint.
So with the Hanover area, is that the piece that's along, when you get off the Nanticoke exit and you're coming from, Is that all of that construction there that's along the highway in Natico?
That's North Point, yes. Yes, North Point
North
development.
Point in Natico?
Hanover.
Hanover. Yes, Hanover comes as prior to.
And I would also say that we discussed this, that there is no loss of revenue on the current taxes with Alerta.
Are there any other,
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
are there any sections of the city right now that have been, identified as a place that we would do something similar to this?
Are there any specific sections of the city right now? No. However, we have been working in conjunction through our community revitalization plan to identify some areas that are appropriately aligned with the EOZ program, as well as areas that could be identified for future adaptive reuse. So that will come as we put this together.
Yeah, this is something that you might not know offhand, but looking at some of those sites in North Point and Hanover, the Center Point and Pittston. Do you know the acreage there? I mean, that's a large.
They're large commercial sites, yes. I don't know the acreage offhand.
Do we have anything like that in Scranton? Do we have anything that compares
Large
to
tracts of
that?
sites, large land sites, no, not currently in the city of Scranton. But the chamber will be partnering to put a very detailed marketing plan in place, should this be approved, to market this.
But this could be a business or commercial space that's available for purchase instead of like new development like you're talking about.
That's a good question.
This could apply to a commercial building now that can be renovated.
That is correct.
Versus the development on 81 you're speaking of.
That is correct.
Is it actually just internal renovations, or you actually have to expand the square footage of the footprint, correct, to be considered an improvement?
Correct.
So I just like to reiterate what I said at the work session. I'm in favor of the motion. I think it's a great step forward for the city. I think that if we work together, we can actually entice businesses to come here rather than have to be afraid. I took advantage of a KOZ-style program when I built my home about 17, 18 years ago. It was only for 2 years, but it did impact my decision on whether to buy land and build a home as compared to buy a pre-existing home. It's the reason, one of the main reasons that I did build a home. And I found land in a neighborhood that I liked. I built it. I took advantage of that program. I feel like this is very similar, and I'm excited to move forward with this proposal.
Okay, so we have a
So
table.
we have a table, we have a second, so we'll do a roll call to see if we're tabling this.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
No.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
No.
Mr. Duffy?
No.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
No.
3 affirmative, 5 negative, motion fails.
So now we have to,
Vote
we're
on
back
it.
on the question for,
Yes, vote on.
For the original.
Now it's time to vote on the original.
so we're ready to
Resolution.
vote on that.
Yep.
Roll call?
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? No. Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
7 affirmative, 1 negative, motion passes.
Director Popel?
Okay, members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, it is the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Technology Committee that the following resolution be approved. Whereas, in October 2017, the Scranton School District was audited by the Auditor General and received audit findings. And whereas, in the district's response to the audit, the district provided the remedy to the finding. And whereas, the district also committed to an audit of the IT program, and therefore be it resolved, the Scranton School Board is requesting an audit of the IT department to be completed by the Auditor General.
Ms. Dixon?
Yes.
That was C2. C1. C1 was pulled, I believe, and was
Second that.
We have to do C1 first.
did you?
C1 is also up for a vote because it was pulled from the consent.
I couldn't hear what you said.
So we have to do C1 and go back.
We read C2.
So we need to do C1 first.
Well, you could do C2 now, but we don't want to forget about C1.
So now, the
Does
resolution
Mr.
that was just read,
I thought it was C1.
can we read that one more time, Mr. Pope?
I couldn't hear what you said.
Can you read that one more time?
C2,
C2. The one that's on the table currently.
you want to go back and do C1 first?
I wouldn't mind voting on this first. What was the...
Members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, it is the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Technology Committee that the following resolution be approved. Whereas in October 2017, the Scranton School District was audited by the Auditor General and received audit findings, and whereas in the district's response to the audit, the district provided the remedy to the findings, and whereas the district also committed to an audit of the IT department, therefore be it resolved, the Scranton School Board is requesting an audit of the IT department to be completed by the Auditor General.
And I will second that motion.
On the question.
Yes, on the question, I believe there's been an audit of the IT department when the audit was done, am I correct?
I did not hear the question.
It's very difficult.
He was asking if there was
I know, it is hard to hear in here.
Say that again.
I believe when the Auditor General came to the district, he also audited the IT department, am I correct?
He did, yes, an audit was, the IT department was part of the Auditor General's audit, yes.
Correct. Okay, and I'm just asking, why are we doing this again? Why?
The board, in the response to the Auditor General's findings, we remedied the finding.
Okay.
But the board, at the time, asked that we do an audit of the IT department. So the solution was that PFM was going to assist us in doing the IT audit. The PFM started to assist us doing the audit. We ran into some staffing difficulties and the project stalled. The audit was stalled because there's much information that our IT director at the time would be able to answer, but that person retired. The responsibilities were shifted over to 3 other departments. Those chiefs were getting accustomed to the IT department, so we were on hold. When PFM started to request information, they began to request it from Mr. Laffey. Mr. Laffey at the time, because we had a retirement of our chief financial officer, was unable to meet the demands of the Budget and Finance Office and take this on as another responsibility. So in finding a way to get this done, in the resolution C1, I am asking for assistance from the NEIU for them to come in and help to oversee our projects that are stalled, and this is one of them. So what the administration's solution is to contract with the NEIU for $2,500 a month, and this is a resolution that you have, for their IT director to come into the district and assist us for an unspecified time. We can end this relationship at any time we want to, but if we kept this person for 1 year, the total cost would be $30,000, which would be a tremendous savings to the district as opposed to hiring another IT director at this time. The board just a few weeks ago suggested that the IT audit be conducted by the Auditor General, and they requested a resolution in that fashion. I sent a resolution to the board asking for 6 months to allow us to work with the NEIU IT director, PFM, and our own people to get this audit done. The board, at the last meeting we had, requested that I take the 6 months out and that write the resolution plain and simple that the board wants the Auditor General to come in and do the IT audit. The Auditor General, not too long ago in the newspaper, said he wants us to get ready for his audit because he is going to come back and audit the district. From my standpoint, I feel as though I need the opportunity to do the work with my staff, with PFM, and with this additional help from the director at NEIU in order to prepare for the Auditor General to come in for his audit. So for this particular resolution, C2, in requesting an audit of the Auditor General, I feel as though the Auditor General is coming anyway, and that I, as the superintendent, would like the opportunity in C1 to get our work done that was stalled.
I kind of agree with you. It seems a little redundant that the board needs to ask the Auditor General to come in if he's already coming in. Okay, and I do agree with the doctor. I believe she should have ample time, along with the IT department, to do what they need to do prior to this audit. I agree.
Are we on the question right now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to say, I think there's two sides to this coin. We're looking for additional funding from the state, and we're trying to show the state that we're doing our best effort to control our expenditures. And also, I think the other side of the coin is to clear up possible waste in the past. When looking at some of the Auditor General's findings, the one that we did push to the Auditor General was the health benefits for one of our non-employees. When we looked into that, we found that, I mean, in the finding, it did not say misuse, abuse, fraud, things like that. But we did push that through, and we did find things like that. In this specific finding here with the IT department, it does say misuse, abuse, and possible theft. So I stand firm with this one. I do think that to show the state we're doing our due diligence and to clean up some of the things of the past, I think this needs to occur.
Possible theft?
That's what the Auditor General states, possible theft.
Is there something in writing that says that?
What number of finding was it? Do we know, Mr. Lappin? Finding number 7, possibly?
I'd like clarification on that before we vote. You're accusing somebody of theft.
I'm quoting the Auditor General's finding.
Well, I'd like to see that finding.
Board, I'd like
Possible
to clarify
theft, okay.
that we did an inventory.
Possibility of misuse.
We did
abuse.
an inventory.
Possibility.
Possibility.
Okay, wait
Well,
a minute.
you know what?
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Please.
Please.
We're talking on the question here. This is a debate, okay? And I wish not to be interrupted, please. All right, Mr. Laff, you can't give us an adequate answer right now. And it's all a possibility, am I correct? Possibility. Now, that even tells me that the superintendent needs the time.
It's on page 90 of the Auditor
She
General.
needs the time and the resources, okay, for her this auditor.
Mr. Lesh and fellow board members, we did an inventory.
It is on the Auditor General's website, Mr. Laffey, page 90.
Excuse me, I was trying to.
Dr. Kieran, you have the floor.
Thank you. We've done an inventory following the audit. The inventory did not show theft. or missing computers. What the auditors pointed out to me was that one computer was unaccounted for. And the explanation for that was that computer had been sent away to be repaired. And instead of the computer coming back to us, the same computer being repaired, the number on it was different because they sent a new machine. That was not accounted for in our inventory. So we've done an inventory. I believe, there's, when the Auditor General comes and into the district, they sit with the superintendent and ask if there are things that are on my mind. And I think Mr. Popel, having done this work, understands what I'm saying. And I do point out things that are on my mind or things that I have heard from our board members or our staff, and they are happy to look into those things. So when the Auditor General returns, we will have our work completed. We will have reported out to the board, and at that time, it does not preclude the Auditor General from, when they come into the district, looking into our IT department once again to see if we answered the findings in the report.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Gretton, I just want to reiterate, at the Budget and Finance meeting, I had asked you if you recommended that we do our own audit first, and you did say yes.
Yes, we're prepared, along with Dr. Curry's suggestions. We get the IT person from the IU who is more familiar with a lot of the technical pieces of equipment and the connections you have. That person will be able to start running with the team that we're going to bring in. PSM is going to bring in somebody who has the expertise in educational as well as commercial IT work to do an audit of the programs that are in place and recommendations for the future. But certainly, what we need that person who can properly address some of the issues. That person doesn't exist currently in the administration. He retired in June and has not been replaced. So that's good.
And that we would take that off Mr. Laffey being interrupted with that. Okay.
Excuse me, Doctor, when do you think the IU people would be coming into the district to do this service?
They're willing to start immediately.
Okay, if that being the case, then I'd like to put a motion on the floor that we table this for a month to see what progress that we're getting from the IU, to see how that is coming on before we involve the Auditor General's office. Because, as was stated here before, there's no question about it, the Auditor General is coming back. Secondly, there is a section of the audit, it's in all audits, it's called the status of prior year's findings and recommendations. That's the first thing they're going to look at. They're going to look at where the findings were written, what action was taken, what was corrective action taken, and if corrective action was taken, is it satisfactory to the Auditor General that we made the progress? So, with that being said, I'd like to put a motion on the table that we take a motion on the floor that this resolution be tabled.
I'll second that, and the reason I'm going to second is because I feel like the motion will not pass tonight, and I don't want to rule out the possibility of having the Auditor General come in. If things aren't going the correct way in the audit, or if there's anything that we find at any point that leads to theft, or anything even similar to that, I think that needs to be something that's out of our hands and not only put into the Auditor General's hands, but maybe local authorities or state authorities, other than someone that just has auditing power.
So I'd just like to say that it is an audit. It is finding number 9.
I'll let you read that first.
So it says that the IT inventory records and unassigned equipment incomplete, unreliable, resulting in the increase increased risk of loss, theft, and misuse. And I'd like to just remind the board that when we talked about the non-employee getting benefits, none of this language was used in that. So this is stronger language. And when we did ask him to come in, we did find some of those things in that finding. And I would suggest that the board moves ahead with doing with this.
Mr. Schuster, I'm a little confused. Did we ask the Auditor General to come in?
Oh, yes, the
Or
Attorney
the
General.
Attorney General? I think we're confusing the two bodies. The Attorney General came in and pursued what you're talking about. And in that finding, number 9, what the Auditor General is saying is we're putting you on notice that you have to tighten up your controls or there could be theft or loss or damage. So that's why we need the help to do the things we're going to try to do working with PFM to get everything tightened up so we are no longer at risk.
Can I speak now?
I don't know, I'm not running the meeting, Ms. Dixon
Well,
is.
I'd like to speak. So, almost a year ago, we promised in a corrective action to the Auditor General we're going to do an audit. Guess what? We haven't. So, but under watch, we've had, at every other department, we've had everybody else come in as a second set of eyes, whether it's for special ed, the business office. So what's wrong with having another set of eyes come in and help us out with this department?
And
I
we
don't see
will
any
have that with PFM. And that's
there's a
the
resolution
opinion.
in front of us. Let's just vote on it.
There's a motion to table, and there's a second.
So, we're going to roll call.
Mr. Schuster?
Before we do this, I would like to remind us that, again, when seeking state funding, I think this is the other side of the coin with cleaning up some of the things we've done in the past and making sure we're 100% moving forward. So a motion to table, I'm going to vote no.
So just one last thing before, I'm sorry. I will be abstaining due to the fact of my employment. So when that comes around, there's my explanation.
Mr. Schuster?
Motion to table, I'm voting no. Or is this the motion for the original?
This is the roll call to table.
Mr. Casey?
Abstain.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
No.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
No.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
4 affirmative, 3 negative, 1 abstention. Motion passes.
Now do we go to C1? Members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, is the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Technology Committee that the following should be approved. Whereas the Scranton School District strives to ensure that its students, faculty, and staff have the necessary technology to learn and work without interruption, and whereas the Northeastern Educational Intermediate Unit will provide a technology specialist to assess and evaluate technology projects throughout the year, the district, as per the attached agreement, and assist PFM with the IT audit, and therefore be resolved, the Scranton School Board hereby approves the agreement between the Scranton School District and the Northeast Educational Intermediate Unit for Technology Program Evaluation Management.
Second.
On the question.
On the question, I would like to make a motion to table this resolution.
Are we getting the audit done at some point, somewhere?
Did we get a second on the table?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Who seconded?
Director McCann.
Oh, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Roll call?
Mr. Casey?
No.
Mr. Duffy?
No.
Ms. Gilmartin?
No.
This is the thing.
Mr. Lesh?
No.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
No.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
No.
2 affirmative, 6 negative, motion fails.
on the original question?
So on the question, Northeast Intermediate Unit providing technology specialists to assist and evaluate with our IT department. I am in agreement with this, but with the IT audit, I'd like to make a friendly amendment to scratch off the with the IT audit, that wording, and the third paragraph.
So you're making a friendly amendment so that the NEIU is not involved in the IT audit?
Yes, the original thing that was supposed to occur was that the NEIU was going to come in and manage our IT department, possibly help with some of the...
And provide oversight.
Yeah.
Oversight and management of stalled projects. The IT audit is a stalled project, and I kept saying that for weeks now.
So can we use that verbiage in the friendly amendment? And then it'll fall under it.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't speak into the mic. Can we use the language you just used, which will include the IT audit and the rest of the scope?
Do we have
It's
a different
in there.
resolution?
Mr. Schuster, I have
It is in there in paragraph 2, to assist PM with the PFM with the IT audit and. So what is, Mr. Schuster, what are you requesting the change be?
So this resolution just deals with the audit? Is that what I'm reading?
No, it therefore let it be resolved. Part, it talks about the technology program evaluation and management.
Yeah, I was just asking for a friendly minute to scratch the IT audit from this.
Well, that's not what I'm requesting. I want them to be available to assist PFM with the IT audit.
Yeah, I guess the way it's going to go is the friendly amendment isn't going to pass anyway, so we could have a roll call vote.
Roll call?
I'm sorry,
What's
did
the roll call?
Did we have a
It's
second
on
on the
there.
friendly?
What's the roll call?
The roll call's on the original amendment?
It's on the friendly amendment to scratch off the IT department or to hit it on.
The roll call's on a friendly amendment to scratch out the IT
The IT audit.
audit.
Is that correct, Mr. Schuster? It's so hard to hear up here.
That is correct.
Mr. Gritton, did I hear you say that you would utilize the Northeast Intermediate Unit to assist PFM with the IT audit?
Yes.
Okay, that's why it's in.
Additional expertise.
Correct.
Be able to answer some of the questions to get the IT audit moving. That's one of the projects that we wanted to address.
Yeah, I'm assuming this isn't going to pass anyway.
Okay, so this roll call, so this roll call is on the friendly amendment to exclude the IT audit. Roll call?
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
No.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
No.
Mr. Duffy?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
No.
5 negative, 4 affirmative. I'm sorry.
So now we're going back to the original
Yes.
resolution.
We have a second, don't we?
Yep.
So we're roll call?
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
No.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
7 affirmative, 1 negative, motion passes.
Sorry for the confusion. I should have gone with C1 first, but I made the assumption.
So it's your first time back in the school.
I'm just a kid.
Okay, now we're going to Director McAndrew.
D5.
D5.
School District of the City of Scranton. The members of the Board of the School Directors of the City of Scranton, it is recommendation of the Superintendent and the Education Committee that the following resolution is approved. Whereas PA Schoolwork is a coalition of organizations from across Pennsylvania working together to advocate for Pennsylvania public schools, their students, and the communities they serve. And whereas PA Schoolwork mission is to ensure that every child, regardless of their background or where they live, is attending a public school that has the funds necessary to help them succeed. And whereas PA Schools Work, Action Summit is looking for 2 leaders from each Pennsylvania school district to advocate for adequate and fair public education funding. And therefore be it resolved that the Scranton School Board hereby appoints Alexis Kirian, Superintendent, Patrick Lavin, Business Manager, and board members Paul Duffy, Katie Gilmartin, and Barb Dixon to represent the Scranton School District with PA Schools Work, respectively submitted.
Second.
On the question, I would like to add and offer this to all the board members because there's no limit on how many of us could represent our school district. And Ms. Gilmartin voiced that she wanted to be part of that. Like I said, I already met with the ambassador of this program. So if there's anybody else that wants to add their name to this initiative, we can make an amendment and add your name on the resolution. You would like that, Tom?
I'll second.
Okay, so we're making a friendly amendment to add Tom Schuster.
Well, I thought you were just going to leave it open to any member. Or is that what you're going to do? Maybe a rotational basis when someone can't make it, or you're just asking for additional names?
We need particular names? We need the names?
Yes.
Yes.
And the
And we could rotate, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to be a part of this.
Well, there's a lot of work to do, and the more hands on deck, the better. I believe the core group that you're going to identify here will be the people who will go to the meetings, bring back the information to all of you, and get you involved in some way or another, because it is not just 4 or 5 people. We're looking for everyone to be involved in this initiative.
If the way you want to word it is like alternate delegates, if that is more appropriate, I wouldn't mind being an alternate
But
delegate.
Attorney Audi, we need the actual names for this?
No, we don't need the, sorry, I thought you were asking me if we need the roll call vote.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody knows that they're invited to participate in this so we could make an amendment. Any other board member?
I will say, when we were invited to the first meeting, they wanted to know the names of everyone who was appointed by the board. I didn't bring my packet, but in the packet they have a sample resolution. So they do ask for names of people who are coming. You have to register by name, and they communicate with us by email. So I think everybody can be involved, but I also think you need to have somebody that's going to hold it together in case we're rotating and nobody rotates, nobody goes. We don't want that either.
That's why I'm just proposing maybe alternate delegates. You know, if one of these members can't make it, add me to the list, give me a call, and I can take their place.
So the amendment should include more than just adding Mr. Schuster's name. I think it should say that we're adding Tom Schuster and any alternate delegate when there are openings.
Okay. So do I have a second
So
on
to
this?
expand it.
Roll call?
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Pope? Yes. Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
7 affirmative.
Okay. I just want, and then we have to go the original or no?
Yes.
So we have a second on the original? Yes. Mr. Lesh seconded it. So now roll call?
Mr. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy? Yes. Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
7 affirmative.
Director Gilmartin?
Resolution I-1 to the members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, It is the recommendation of the superintendent and the policy committee that the following resolution be approved. Whereas the Scranton School District strives to ensure that it maintains effective records management, and whereas the records retention schedule establishes mandatory minimum retention periods for records that are associated with public school districts, and now therefore be it resolved that the Scranton School Board approves the adoption of the records retention schedule and student records recommended policy as per the attached. Respectfully submitted.
On the question?
Question. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add that I was asked to provide this records management policy. This is a policy that's been developed by our firm, but we compared it to your policy that you currently have, and this policy is completely in compliance with both your policy and the law.
When it comes to, say, board information, it comes through all areas here of this, but do we have any kind of storage issue where we wouldn't be able to keep some of the board information for forever if need be?
Mr. Schuster, the board had had a resolution passed that we would not destroy in any way any board records for any period of time.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Does this change this at all?
No, your policy would supersede this document. So we talked about in time being able to do some electronic storing of some of the things. We're not ready to start that project yet, although it's an excellent idea, and I hope that we can get to it. But this records management schedule does not trump the board's policy.
Got it. Okay. Another thing I have on the question is it also has policies, and it says official school board policies retained until 5 years after the policy is changed or repealed. And I would just like to request at this time a copy of the 2011 fraud policy of the district. It was something that we discussed in the past. We said it may have changed. I don't know what time we revised that, but according to the schedule, we should have a copy of that policy.
Which policy?
The policy on fraud.
What kind of policy?
Policy on fraud from 2011.
On what?
Fraud. Yes. So you're requesting a copy of
Copy of
that
the
policy?
the 2011 version.
Sure, we can do that.
All right, to make the motion.
Oh, God, yeah. Sleeping at the wheel here. Roll call.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Sorry.
Mr. Casey?
Yep.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew? Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
7 affirmative.
Pardon me. Members of the School Board of Directors of the City of Scranton, it is the recommendation of the superintendent and the policy committee that the following resolution be approved. Whereas the following policies 005 and 626.1 first read have been revised by the Scranton School District School Board Policy Committee, and now therefore be it resolved that the Scranton School Board hereby approves revisions to policy number 005 and 626.1 as a first read recommended by the Scranton School District School Board Policy Committee. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? On the question, I have a question for the entire board. I don't know if anybody feels the same way. We had the budget that we were dealing with. We were filling a board vacancy. Now we have another vacancy. And I want to commend Director Bill Martin for doing such a great job on policy. I'm just throwing it out there. I feel like I'm cramming for a final exam with all of this going on, that it's very difficult to go through all of these policies that have been introduced at the last committee meeting. And I'm just asking if anybody, if we're okay with taking our board operating guidelines and moving them to January in the committee so we could really look at them with the full board and absorb what's in these policies. There's just so much information. That's just my feeling, and I just wanted to communicate it to the board.
Would you like to table this until
I'd like to consider taking the board operating guidelines, because that's in January when we're starting out with the full board and starting a new year, and maybe go back to committee with them and just review them one more time, because I think there's so many policies that I understand with legislative updates that a lot of them have to occur, but I would really like to take the time to review the board operating guidelines again, and direct Attorney Audi, you're with us now. Maybe you'd have some suggestions. I'm not sure. I don't know how anybody else feels.
I think we've discussed them at length, pardon me. I think we've discussed them at length at several policy committee meetings. I know the one in October you weren't able to attend, and I think a lot of that work was done at that time, and then I believe we met again in November. I know we've shared these, we've reviewed them. I think Director Duffy enjoys that especially, right? It's one of your favorite things when I make you talk about policy for hours and hours. So I certainly think we've had the opportunity to talk through these things, and as Mr. Audi has been at the table, I've kept him abreast of the changes and have had him part of the conversation as well.
Just my thoughts.
Most of these are second read, aren't they, or possibly third read?
No,
these two are
I remember
first.
going over them in
These two
detail.
are first. The 6261 is not part of the board operating guidelines.
No, that is something we brought,
For a policy legislation.
6261, we identified specifically by recommendation of PSBA the amount of reimbursement allowed for meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We actually identified the amount rather than just saying reimbursement. And that was a recommendation of PSBA.
So all these have minimum one more read, is what we're saying.
So
these two do. I believe the next group does not, but that's what because those are second read, correct? Many of those are what we reviewed at the meeting. We received them.
Right.
You gave them to us, and then they came again in our packets.
So for what we're talking about now, policy 005 is the board's policy. That's up to you to decide how you want to handle that. I believe what I'm hearing Ms. Dixon say is you have 2 new board members that will be on board, and she would like them to have the opportunity to have input or to at least see these. So she's asking to table 005. This is what I'm hearing. I'm saying policy 626.1 is an administrative policy recommended by PSBA to add the dollar amount allowed for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for travel reimbursement. So that one, I believe, from administrative's point, I would hope that the board would consider allowing that one to move forward.
Yeah, I'm fine with that one. It's just I'm trying to look at the legislative updates with all these board operating guidelines. I'm just considering the new people that are coming on.
But policy should be something that exists outside of the players at the table. It shouldn't be something dictated by new board members.
Exactly, but they should have input on it as well. And policy is such a very important part of how we operate. I just feel like maybe some of this is rushed. We have a lot of
I
policy.
tend to agree, because you know what? They're going to spend the next year here. They're going to spend the next year.
So 626 is PSBA recommended. Do we
I don't know if anybody was that interested in policy until about 11 months ago, but it's fine.
I was going to ask for an overview of policy 005 on organizations.
005, I believe you have.
So what were the recommended changes there?
The recommended changes are to bring the committee list in line with what was approved at the November meeting.
Now,
That was the only change, was that committee list?
Yes. So we discussed that at the October 15th meeting, I believe. We reviewed 4 versions of new committees. We came to consensus. We brought it to the board for a vote in November. It was approved, not unanimously, but it was approved. And now we need to, as I discussed at that policy committee meeting, and I think at the time of the vote I mentioned it as well, we needed to align 005 and 006 with that. And that's what's happening here. Now, that in no way impacts the president's right to establish an ad hoc committee.
Ms. Gilmartin, 005 was a request just recently to align that policy with your other policies, right?
I think that was overlooked. I did reiterate it recently again.
Right.
But 006 came through a few weeks ago.
Right.
005.
Right, and
also references the committee.
Actually, today, Mr. Gentilezza and I talked about 005, trying to locate the section of the policy.
Right. It's kind of hiding in there. It's a sentence rather than a list in the other
It was hidden in there. It was not listed. It was in paragraph form. So I believe this is the first time you're all seeing it listed this way.
But it is the same as policy 006.
The content is the same. The layout is different.
Ms. Gilmartin, the layout of these 8 committees, coming down from 16, I have a copy of the policy here. Are they in alignment with what we voted on at that point in time?
Yes, I believe so.
For some reason, I did get an alternate list of committees.
I talked to Katie, Director Gilmartin.
That's fine, I'm Katie.
And I was one of those that voted no on those because all these policies came through. And after looking at these policies, I suggested that we change some of the committee structure and talk about it as a board because, like for example, technologies listed in education, we're talking about putting in a whole new information system this year. I can't remember what the other one was. Purchasing probably should be part of budget and finance. So I was just throwing it out there. So if you're not in favor of it, that's fine. I'm just saying how I feel. I just feel we're inundated with these board operating guidelines and with the budget and everything else we have to do. It's very difficult to keep up with all this.
So just so I get the timeline, so we discussed this at a committee meeting or in a work session. We decided upon something, we voted on it, and now we're at the first read looking to go back to the table with it? Specifically policy 005?
Essentially, yes.
Is 005, it is first read, right?
Yes.
So it's not something you would pass tonight anyway. 005 would just be a first read, and then people would give input for 30 days until the second read. Okay. So if there are any changes in it, those changes would be made after the first read within 30 days. At the next board meeting, it would be on for second read.
Okay.
And at the second read, you know, in between the first read and the second read, if anyone wants to discuss anything in 005, they would take it to the policy committee. The policy committee would review it and then bring those changes to the work session and then to the board. Okay. That's how we've been doing it.
Okay, and that's fine. So those committees that I submitted to the entire board, not only the policy committee, but I discussed them with Director Gilmartin first, will be discussed at the work session.
That's what...
Perhaps we need a policy committee meeting in the month of January.
Right.
That's... Okay.
I noticed there was something brought forward to streamline the committee process. I know it was something that you were in favor of. What was, are there any benefits to this that you think off the top of your head? Going from 16, 17 committees down to 8.
Is there any benefit to streamline? Absolutely. Actually, my opinion is the board should work as a board as a whole. instead of having all these different committees. But across the state, we find that there's anywhere from 6 to 8 or 9 committees. 17 is excessive, and by having 9, each board member is a part of a committee. And I am almost certain that the policy says that the superintendent and the chairman of the board are members of all the committees. So you see, when you have a committee, I'm present.
And that was highly recommended in our PSBA training that we did for the board. They were saying that we had way too many committees.
So are we looking to go to 8 or are we looking to go to 9?
I
It's like a
believe,
little confusing because
Well, we've
Yeah, I
approved
believe
8.
there are
We've
9.
approved 8.
aren't there 9, Ms. Gilmore?
No, I believe we approved 8 committees.
Oh, you approved 8.
In 005 of this is 8.
Okay, so I'm fine with that, so we can take that to the work session and discuss that further if we want
just
to
the-
make any changes.
Just from your own experience, you've worked with multiple boards. Is this something that you've seen often, that boards have a smaller amount of committees, or do they often have?
I've never seen a board have 17, ever, anywhere.
Well, up until last year, it was only 16.
16.
But you've never seen.
9 is even on the higher side.
Okay. So it's average, or
It's
almost
average.
normal. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're fine. Okay.
So with regard to policy, the only 2 cents that I'll be throwing in is I do put a lot of faith in Director Martin and Dr. Curie and
I do too.
our
Oh, I know you too.
that they're done correctly. I won't have the time whether we do 1 a month or 10 a month. I have entirely too much going on. I know a lot of it's a statutory obligation to continue to update them, but I am putting faith in my colleagues that they are doing their due diligence. And unfortunately, this is one of my shortcomings. I appreciate the work that everyone's doing, and I'm kind of in favor of what will make it easier on everybody. But I'm okay with this tonight. Moving forward, I'll just say maybe to be amiable to the whole board, we just reduce the amount of policies we look at if it's appropriate by statute.
Yeah, there's legislative updates. I'm not criticizing Ms. Bill Martin at all. I have faith in her as well. Thank you.
She's done a lot of hard work.
Yes.
It's very much
I'm just telling you how I feel. I'm just throwing it out there.
So the updated resolution has both policy 005 and then 626, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So do we have a second on that? No, we're on the question. Yes.
So we're voting on 005 and 626.
Yes.
Ready?
Roll call.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Pople? Mr. Schuster?
Wait a second. I'm so sorry to stop us. What are we voting on?
005 and 6261.
The resolution as it stands.
Okay, but that is first read.
Yes.
Both of those.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
To the members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, it is the recommendation of the superintendent and the policy committee that the following resolutions be approved, whereas the following policies and board operating guidelines second read have been revised and implemented as recommended by the Pennsylvania School Board Association. 006, 108, 246, 311, 704, 806, 808, 006 BOG 0, BOG 1, BOG 2, BOG 3, and 004 BOG 2. Now therefore be it resolved that the Scranton School Board hereby approves as second read the revisions and implementation of the above policies and board operating guidelines as recommended by the Pennsylvania School Board Association. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? I have one on the question, on the second read policies. Not just these in particular. When a policy is in second read, what are the options if we have a concern with the policy?
That should be brought up in the
If you have a concern about the second read, you should raise that before the final passage.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Roll call?
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
To the members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, it is the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Policy Committee that the following resolution be approved. Whereas the following Board Operating Guideline 004BOG1 second read has been revised by the Scranton School District Policy Committee. And now therefore be it resolved that the Scranton School Board hereby approves the revised Board Operating Guideline 004BOG1 as recommended by the School District Policy Committee. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question? Roll call.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
It is the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Policy Committee that the following is approved, whereas subcommittees allow board members and administrators the opportunity to discuss details in a public forum regarding specific issues within departments and make recommendations to the full board. And whereas the current committee list consists of 17 committees, and the desire of the Policy Committee is to merge committees, and therefore be it resolved, the Scranton School Board hereby adopts the newly created list of committees. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
I would ask for a motion to table this. There's misinformation on here.
I'd like to make a motion to table.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon? 7 affirmative.
It is the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Policy Committee that the following resolution be approved, whereas the following administrative regulations 304 AR 11, 304 AR 12, and 304 AR 13, first read have been revised by the Scranton School District Board Policy Committee. And now therefore be it resolved that the Scranton School Board hereby approves revisions to administrative regulations 304 AR 11, 304 AR 12, 304 AR 13 as a first read recommended by the Scranton School District School Board Policy Committee. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
Oh, sorry. Question. Roll call.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon? 7 affirmative.
Getting there. It is the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Policy Committee that the following resolution be approved, whereas the following administrative regulations, 304 AR 14 and 304 AR 15, first read have been implemented by the Scranton School District School Board Policy Committee. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Scranton School Board hereby approves to implement administrative regulations 304 AR 14 and 304 AR 15 as a first read recommended by the Scranton School District School Board Policy Committee. Respectfully submitted.
Second. On the question? Roll call.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Director Casey.
J2. Members of the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton, the Superintendent of Schools, and the Personnel Committee, the following resolution for your consideration. Whereas Millennium Administrators, the district's healthcare consultants, have gone to market to obtain stop-loss insurance quotes, and whereas Companion Life and Vista Underwriting, the district's current stop-loss carrier, provided the most competitive quote and an estimated annual premium of $970,369. Therefore, be it resolved, the Scranton School Board of Directors approves the stop-loss renewal with Companion Life and Vista Underwriting and authorizes the administration and the district solicitor to review and execute all contracts related to this matter. Respectfully submitted.
Second.
On the question?
On the question, what was the number of this resolution?
J2.
It's J2.
J2.
I believe this was removed from consent agenda,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Do you want to wait until we get the resolution in front of you?
I think Mr. Laffey explained this earlier.
You okay, Mr. Schuster?
I wouldn't mind getting it.
Yes.
Okay.
Roll call?
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Koval? Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
J3, to the members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, it is the recommendation of the Personnel Committee that the attached list of appointments, assignments, resignations, leaves of absences, and professional contracts is approved. Appointments are effective upon receipt of proper criminal records, immigration, and medical and child abuse reports. Salaries are in accordance with the collective bargaining agreements respectfully submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
On the question?
On the question, was there 2 copies of this going around? I feel like I saw 2 different copies.
I've only seen one. Has J4 been amended? I don't believe it has.
J3?
No, I'm sorry, yes, J3.
So just going down, section A, 1 person, section B, 2 people, section C, 2 people, D1, E3, F2, G1, H2, I1.
Correct.
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 Does everybody have the same?
Yeah. Roll call?
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Koval? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
J4, members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, it is the recommendation of the Superintendent and Personnel Committee that the following resolution be approved. Whereas the Scranton School District advertised for requests for qualifications for special education, legal counsel, and labor counsel, and whereas the Scranton School District has received competitive proposals, and therefore be it resolved, the Scranton School Board hereby appoints Sweet, Stevens, Katz, and Williams for special education and labor counsel respectfully submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
On the question?
Yes, on the question, I'd like to have an amendment, and I'd like to go with the recommendations as the lowest bidder, and I'd like to change the name from Sweet Stevens, Kate, and Williams to Joyce, Carmody, and Moran. That's also a recommendation by PFM.
So you're
For,
just...
for labor?
For Labor Council, yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I would like to say that it was discussed at one of the previous meetings that there might be a possible conflict of interest with which Mr. Moran did address to the board, and I think at that point in time, the board requested a signed affidavit that he was not the trustee of True Solutions. Was that provided?
Mr. Moran's here tonight. So.
Mr. Moran is here tonight. Yes.
There was no request communicated to me for an affidavit. I'd be happy to provide one.
Okay, yeah, I would like an affidavit saying that.
If the board so chooses, I'd be happy to provide an affidavit.
Okay.
Mr. McAndrew, did you pass those things down?
Yes,
The
Roll call?
What's the,
Yeah.
an amendment to
I
change
need to
the,
know what's happening.
roll call to change the amendment?
The amendment to Joyce Moran Carmody for labor and Sweet Stevens, Katz, and Williams for special education. I'd like to add on to that pending the signed affidavit.
Contingent upon the
Contingent upon the signed affidavit so that we can get our negotiations started as soon as possible.
Just to be clear, so you'd like me to reduce to writing what I represented at the top of this meeting, be clear about that, and then sign it under the pains and penalties of perjury? Happy to do that.
Okay.
And I seconded the motion, and that is to list, once again, Sweet Stevens, Katz, and Williams for Special Education Council, Joyce Moran Carmody, am I missing a fourth name?
Joyce Carmody,
PC, for Labor Council.
Roll call.
Mr. Howdy, if anyone on the current board received any donations, campaign donations from this group that was at least incorporated by Mr. Moran, would they have to recuse themselves at this time?
There would be, I would believe there'd be a conflict.
Okay, thank you. So what's the, what are we voting on?
But wait a minute, I want to make sure you're not referring to me, Director Schuster. Yeah. Are you referring to me because I had True Solutions?
That would be correct.
Okay. So if I put that on my campaign fundraising finance report from True Solutions, is that a conflict of interest?
I would just say that there would either be an apparent conflict or a potential conflict of interest. Your disclosure of it is perfectly appropriate, and that's fine. I'm not suggesting anybody has done anything wrong. I was simply answering a question with the limited facts that I have. That's all.
So are you suggesting I recuse myself?
No, I'm not.
So I don't recuse myself? No. Okay. So I don't need to recuse myself?
I don't believe you have to recuse yourself.
Okay.
So what is the motion now?
The motion is, the motion is to add the friendly amendment to assign Sweet Stevens, Catherine Williams for Special Education Council, Joyce Moran, Carmody PC for Labor Council, contingent upon the signed affidavit by the Carmody Moran PC firm, stating what was said tonight.
Roll call?
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
No.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
No.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
No.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
5 affirmative, 3 negative, motion passes.
So, on the original question.
On the original question? Or?
That was the original.
Well, on the original, now we have to do special ed.
There's not an original question. The new resolution is to appoint, forgive me,
Sweet Stevens, Cassim Williams for
and
special ed.
Joyce Carmody and Moran for labor.
Okay. So, do I have a second?
It's been seconded.
It's been seconded? Roll call? Okay. Do I have to roll call this?
I don't believe you do.
Director Rowdy, do we roll call this?
Yes.
Welcome to the board, Director.
Okay. Roll call?
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
No.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
No.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
5 affirmative, 3 negative, motion passes.
J5, to the members of the Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Scranton, the Superintendent of Schools, and the Personnel Committee present the following resolution for your consideration. Whereas Benestar Group Retiree Health Solutions provides retiree medical plan and prescription drug services to the Scranton School District, and whereas Benestar has proposed a renewal effective January 1, 2019 at a rate of $724.93 per retiree covered, and whereas the district see the need to continue these services for 2019, therefore be it resolved the Scranton School Board of Directors approves the renewal of Benestar Group Retiree Health Solutions and authorizes the administration and the district solicitor to review and execute all contracts related to this matter. Respectfully submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy? Did he, Mr. Duffy? Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
J7, members of the Board of School Directors of the City of Scranton, it is the recommendation of the Superintendent and the Personnel Committee that the following resolution be approved. Whereas Pat Laffey was appointed to the position of Business Manager May 7, 2018, with no adjustment to salary. And therefore, be it resolved, the Scranton School Board hereby approves Mr. Laffey to be adjusted to $100,000 effective immediately. Respectfully submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
On the question?
On the question, yes, Dr. Curie, can you provide the stats that you provided to the board so that everyone is aware of how we came up with our decision as to a number?
Yes, I'll be happy to do that.
And if it is budgeted for or not. So.
Yes. First of all, it is budgeted for. It was that salary of our former CFO was not removed from the budget. That salary was $123,860. We researched other school districts of our size and the complexity of budgets. We looked at Hazelton Area School District, which has 11,400 students, and the salary for business manager is $139,610. We looked at the Wilkes-Barre Area School District with a population of 7,070 students there. Business manager receives $109,224,000. We looked at the Harrisburg School District. Their business manager receives $119,500. We looked at the Lancaster School District, which business manager receives $117,669,000. We looked at Carbondale Area School District, which has 1,588 students, and their business manager receives $97,131. So this is the recommended compensation for Mr. Laffey. He has been working for 1 year in this capacity at his previous salary, and this is the recommendation I'm making to bring him up to level with the work that he does, to be compensated for the work he does, and the responsibility that he has and the accountability to the stakeholders, the board, and the superintendent.
So basically what we're doing is we're reducing the salary from $122,000 for the business manager down to $100,000.
$123,860.
Down to $100,000. So that's the motion on the board, to reduce the salary of the business administrator down to $100,000. Correct?
Yes.
Now, Dr. Kurian, just curious, Mr. Laffey decided to say sayonara to us tomorrow, and we had to hire somebody new. Would we be starting them out around that figure?
If they would come for that little bit of money.
Okay.
It's a very...
I'm not suggesting you leave, Mr. Laffey.
While we're on the question, I'd just like to say it was an honor to appoint Pat Laffey originally as our assistant business manager, and it will be just as much a moment tonight to appoint him as our business manager. He's done an outstanding job. He stepped in when the district really needed a lot of help, and he's done a wonderful job, and he's a well-trusted man. Lots of luck.
I echo that, Mr. Laffey. Thank you. Roll call?
Mr. Popel? Yes. Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Lush?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
I think we, again, when we pulled J6, and we didn't read J6.
We did not pull J6. That was a matter of question. The voter was determined we did not. And that's all I have for personnel at this time.
N2? Oh, I'm sorry.
You're right.
We did pull N2, right,
pull
Mr.
N2.
Schuster? N2.
Yeah.
Okay, new business?
N2.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it. Who's in?
So N2 is
Whereas pursuant to
approve NEIU 2019 intergovernmental agreement for special ed services. So intergovernmental would be Mr. Duffy?
Whereas pursuant to 22 PA Code Section 14, school districts may expand said funds and improve said programs and services either by direct service or through arrangements with other agencies. And whereas pursuant to 22 PA Code Section 14, Scranton School District is required to specify which, if any, services will be provided by contract with intermediate units or other agencies. And whereas the district has concluded and determined that the programs and services below listed can be more efficiently or economically operated by contracting with the Northeastern Educational Intermediate Unit, known as NEIU, for provision of the same. Be it therefore resolved that the attached contracts with NEIU for provision of special education programs and services as specified therein are hereby approved for the 2018-2019 school year and thereafter until expiration in accordance with the terms thereof.
And you all received a copy of the NEIU agreement in your packets.
I will second that.
On the question?
on the question, could we just review some of the services that they're going to be providing?
Yes, we'll be happy to do that. So professional and they will be providing professional development, paraprofessional development. They will be providing special education services for our ESY program, for our preschool program. Trying to go through this with you. We contract with the NEIU for many special education services. We use the NEIU for our IEP to assist with IEPs that we are not able to accommodate. They are our district's MAWA for our special education preschool students and for our placement of Nora. Miss Baddock, I see you sitting there. Did I capture most of it by scanning the document, or do you have anything you'd like to add?
You did. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
My voice doesn't usually project well. You did cover everything. I would just point out that the services that primarily run up the cost of that contract are for students in placement there. Those students that are in placement there were placed there prior to my coming to Scranton. They are receiving services there that in some instances could not be provided in the district, and in other instances where they could be provided at, say, our center-based program. The parents are unwilling at this point in time to move the children because they've been there. So for purposes of continuity and education, they're remaining there until they graduate or age out of the program. Right now, we have 4 kids in their life skills program, 3 in the autistic support classroom, 6 in the multi-disabilities classroom, and 3 in the transition program. And the sum total of those children in those programs is several $100,000 for those kids in those programs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Roll call?
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
8 affirmative.
Under new business, I'd like to address the board. I did attempt I did ask Mr. Audi if I could do this in executive session the other evening, and it wasn't appropriate for executive session, so I said I would address it under new business. I would like the board to consider taking a candidate from our second place pool, because it's been such a short time since we appointed our last director, and we had some great candidates that interviewed for the school director seat, so we could be up and running for our January session after our recess. If we had a second place candidate, I would just bring the second place candidate to the table. We had a 6-way tie, and I was just wondering if anybody wants to entertain the idea of suspending the advertising piece and the interview piece, and we could pick those 6 candidates out of a hat and vote on them so we could get that vacancy filled, and we're up and running for January. Anybody's thoughts?
If I just
Yes.
because we did speak this afternoon about
I
the
asked you if that's
possibility.
possible.
I did look into it. Your policy 003 allows for you to suspend a procedure or a policy temporarily, so long as it doesn't violate the law, which in this case it would not violate the law. So as a new business, I think it is an appropriate motion that you can place on the table. Of course, that's up to the board to vote on it, but this, as far as I'm concerned, is perfectly acceptable as an option available for you this evening.
So does that proposal go to a board vote?
Of course, there would have to be a motion.
I would need a motion to suspend the policy
Correct.
for the advertising and the interviewing.
And that motion would be pursuant to policy 003, which allows for the suspension of policy and procedure.
So how would we determine who would be voted on first? I'm sorry.
We would take those, what were they, 6 names, Virginia? Put them in a box, pick their names out, and vote on them.
Do we have the 6 names currently?
But weren't they, weren't they chosen the last time?
I have the tally sheet.
But from the next group of people who were polled,
We're going to pick out of them.
you know who would have, had Mr. Pupple not been appointed, you know the order in which
Yes, I
the other
do.
people would have been voted.
I would say that, yeah, there are some people that maybe would like to apply now that have become more interested.
Right, I mean,
I'm just saying because it's such a short period of time. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Second. Motion said and second.
Okay, so now do we have it on the question? Or just a
well,
roll
we can
call?
answer definitely on the question. On the question, I don't think it's fair to the whole community. I mean, we have a policy, we develop policies, we vote on them. So now we have a policy that we normally follow, and that takes 30 days. We advertise. There might be a couple people that maybe really want to step up and have the opportunity to interview. I think it's more fair if we just follow the same policy. When we don't follow the same policy, it always says go array. It's just my thoughts.
I also think that this is something that, I don't think I remember, that this is something that was discussed in our discussion of policy 004. I think Mr. Duffy raised that issue of should we be banking candidates, and I certainly think it's something to entertain. I don't think I would entertain it at the time that something like this is on the table. If we want to go back, I'm happy as always to go back and look at revising that policy.
I did mention it, and I had no clue that this was going to happen. I mentioned banking it to avoid having to go out every month or two and elect another member because someone has to resign or someone has another obligation to move on. So I normally wouldn't be in favor of it. I'm in favor of it. In 20 days, 25 days, there's going to be more people or differences. Well, I don't know what a week or two did, but I wasn't really expecting this, but I'm willing to do it.
So now at these policies, has any member of the board used gone over these with you to make sure that this was in alignment?
Has any member
So
of
in
the
the last few days, or at least since executive session, has any board member called you to make sure that these policies are in alignment, that this can be done?
I called him to see if it would be in reason to
This
discuss it under new
afternoon.
business. I was going to discuss it in executive session, but we couldn't do that.
Well, this is,
Okay.
you can do this, it's perfectly legal, am I correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
It's just because there's such a short period of time.
Yeah, I was just looking for premeditation.
Premeditation how, Tom? Can you define that, clarify that, please?
If we're, you know,
Tom,
searching
you
out-
always see premeditation in everything.
Well, we got a vote on this, Ann.
That's
Go ahead.
Tom. There's a burglar behind every corner.
There's no burglar.
Okay. Roll
Yeah.
call?
Take a look at yourself, son.
Okay.
Wait, let's be clear. First of all, if we can have
motion.
order, I would appreciate it because I need to focus on what's happening. What are we voting on right now?
The motion to suspend policy 003.
Okay.
No. No. Not the motion to suspend 003.
No, we're not
just the-
suspending policy 003. We're suspending policy 005, I believe.
Just the advertising.
Just the
interview process
advertising.
Again, since we had a tie of 6 people.
For the board vote.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Has this got a second yet?
Yeah, Mr.
We're on the vote.
Mr. Pope? Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
No.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
No.
Mr. Popel?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
5 affirmative, 3 negative, motion passes.
So now, as the last meeting, do we read out a list of the candidates, Ms. Oak?
Can you read out a list of the candidates?
I would suggest that we read out the list of candidates. I think their names have to be written down. Probably the secretary should confirm that there's one name per person listed, put it in a box, and then I would suggest that the secretary pull the name from the box, and that would be the first vote.
I thought I confirmed with Mrs. Orr before we proceeded to this vote that those candidates were already pulled from that box on that night and were ranked. And I think, not to put you on the spot, but Ms. Hall was in the room with her. So you may be aware of that list as
Okay,
well.
maybe I misunderstood the process.
I have the tally sheet. There are 6 candidates that tied for 4. They are Pedro Inez.
Were they tied for what?
Tied with 4 votes each, so that was second place.
Right, Sarah? Okay. Pedro Inez, Gail Barr, Tom Borthwick, Sarah Cruz, Tom McIntyre, and Gopal Patel. They all tied for 4 with 4 entries.
But you had not that
There
evening
was-
then pulled those names.
Was there
We
any?
never got to that point.
We never got to that.
No, because
Okay, so there was no ranking after that. They're all ranked equal right now.
Right. We had a first place winner, and then we had 6 that were tied at second.
Then we need to do what I suggested, which is to write their names down. Confirm that there's one person that there's one name written down per person, per candidate, and pull that name and then put a vote out on that name.
Sarah, would you like to just assist, just watch me?
It's your time to shine, Sarah.
Sarah, you're back again. I didn't realize it'd be in such a short period of time.
Sarah, now's your chance. You could put your name in, Sarah.
Okay, I am writing Inez, Barr, Borthwick. Cruz. McIntyre. And Patel. Why do you have to leave this up to me? We have fun.
There's a box top, Virginia, over there.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Got one?
McIntyre.
Great.
What happens now?
We have to vote.
We have to stay over here with the box.
When I thought about this, I checked with PSBA and they said just to name somebody. And I said, no, I wanted to be fair because there were 6 ties, second places.
So we have on the question?
Are we have, do we need a motion?
We need a motion to appoint.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Second.
On the question?
On the question, I'm just going to reiterate, I'd be, as I said 2 or 3 weeks ago, whenever we did this last, I'd be in favor of Mr. Borthwick, Mr. McIntyre, and Mr. Patel, because they all have students in the district, and that's extremely important to me. I've never served with another person that currently has a student in the district. Thank you.
And no commentary on Mr. McIntyre's ability. No, none at all. But I do not feel comfortable making this choice without anyone's credentials in front of us. This was a long time ago that we had these interviews, looked at these resumes, and this is certainly something that could have been entertained by the board with a little bit of time to prepare, but this feels like a surprise to me right now, and I am not comfortable.
It's a surprise. I would say the same.
So, are we roll calling?
I have a motion and a second.
Okay.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
No.
Mr. Lesh?
No.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
No.
5 negative, 3 affirmative, motion fails. We're gonna
Do it again.
Pick again.
Inez?
I'd make a motion for Pedro Inez.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Martin?
No.
Mr. Lesh?
No.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
No.
Mr. Duffy?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
No.
2 affirmative, 6 negative, motion fails.
Cruz.
I make a motion for Sarah Cruz.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Lesh?
No.
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
No.
Mr. Duffy?
No.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon?
No.
3 affirmative, 5 negative, motion fails.
Anita.
Barr?
Who is it?
Gail Barr?
Okay.
No motion? I don't
Oh,
have a motion.
you have to have a motion.
We have a motion. Somebody have a motion?
Nope.
I'll make a motion for Gail Moore.
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call?
Mr. McAndrew?
Yes.
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mr. Casey?
No.
Mr. Duffy?
No.
Ms. Gilmartin?
No.
Mr. Lesh?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
No.
2 affirmative, 6 negative, motion fails. Borthwick? Can I have a motion for Borthwick?
Make a motion for Top Borthwick.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Popel? Mr. Schuster?
No.
Mr. Casey?
No.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
Yes.
Mr. Lesh?
No.
Mr. McAndrew?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
No.
2 affirmative, 6 negative, motion fails. Can I have a motion to appoint a Patel?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Roll call?
On the question, we talked about having the Auditor General come in tonight, and it got voted down. And I remember that question was posed, the question similar was posed to Mr. Patel, and, you know, would he be okay with that? And he said, yeah, but then I remember hearing that when he was on the Sewer Authority Board, he voted no for the Auditor General to come in and do an audit, so I'll be a no for that reason.
I thought we weren't supposed to comment personally.
I'm sorry.
That would have been a matter of public record, though.
Yeah,
right?
well, Director Duffy also commented before. Okay.
Mr. Popel?
Yeah.
Mr. Schuster?
Excuse me, did something official take place that I missed?
They made a motion for Patel, second by Mr. Duffy.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. McAndrew just said on the question, just his feelings.
What did he say?
It's just his feelings about how he would vote. I don't think it's...
Mr. Popel, yes. Mr. Schuster?
No.
Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmartin?
No.
Mr. Lesh?
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew?
No.
Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
5 affirmative, 3 negative, motion passes.
Congratulations, Mr. Popel.
Have a motion to adjourn?
Go Paul.
Take a motion to adjourn.
Everybody,
You
Mr.
should be
Abbey
voting
has-
to adjourn.
Yeah, he has
There
a
should be
matter of order.
there should be a motion to adjourn, a second, and you don't need a roll call vote. You could just
We
say.
just did that.
Oh, you did it?
Yeah.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Was there a
I'll
vote to
lie
adjourn?
to adjourn.
Was there a vote to adjourn? I'm not an attorney.
I I didn't hear.
I had Mr.
I don't
Duffy.
believe we vote. I think we get a motion and a second, and I agree with you. We should be voting.
You
and I
should
don't
be
think we
voting,
do.
at least
Do
just
we vote to adjourn?
all in favor. You don't have to do a total.
Yay,
roll call.
yay.
Yay.
I'm in favor.
Yay, any nays?
Hey, hey.